If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 181. This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 181. Through multiple enhancements, Luo Qing's physical constitution and mental strength had reached a level comparable to that of an Archon. Among the Harbingers present, only 2 had power on par with deities. While most boasted formidable combat prowess, their mental resilience fell short compared to Luo Qing's. With the application of his emotion manipulation cards, the expressions of most Harbingers darkened, as though they'd swallowed something vile. Just as some were on the verge of breaking and meowing aloud. A soft hum came from the throne. The Tsaritsaw's spiritual projection raised a delicate finger, releasing an icy blue glow that enveloped the Harbingers. The weaker-minded Harbingers felt a soothing breeze sweep through their minds, dissolving the peculiar compulsions that had taken hold. Luo Qing. The Tsaritsaw's voice was soft but carried a commanding tone. This ability of yours, quite intriguing. With a slight wave of her finger, the icy blue elemental energy in the hall coalesced above Luo Qing, forming the shape of a mask. Luo Qing looked up. The mask depicted a smiling face, but a single teardrop hung from its right eye, a weeping visage of bittersweet comedy. The rest is up to you, Pierrot, the Tsaritsa said. Her spiritual form dissolved into a streak of light, vanishing from the throne. At the same time, the mask descended into Luo Qing's hands. As soon as he touched it, a surge of unique power coursed through him. He could feel his mental strength increase by nearly 50%. It was evident. The Tsaritsa believed Luo Qing's ability to manipulate emotions was tied to his mental fortitude. By granting him additional power, she sought to augment his talents. The fact that she enhanced his mental strength despite knowing he dared to tamper with the emotions of deities showed her confidence. Either his abilities didn't work on her, or she simply wasn't worried about him turning against her. From this moment forth, Pierrot spoke calmly. Luo Qing Schnitzvish is no longer your name. Your name is now Brighella, the Jester. This was a rite of passage for every Harbinger. To abandon their past entirely, including their name, and be reborn under the Tsaritsa's command. The Harbinger's codename and new identity were bestowed by the Tsaritsa herself. Luo Qing had no say in the matter. From now on, regardless of what he called himself in private, to the Fatui and Snezhnia, he would be known only by one name, Brighella, the Jester. Yes. Luo Qing bowed respectfully. Though he wasn't particularly fond of the name, as the Tsaritsa's subordinate, he had no choice but to play along. Welcome to the fold, Brighella. From the edge of the throne's platform, Child spoke up with a mischievous grin. Now, there's just one final step. A spear materialized in Child's hand, which he then hurled at Luo Qing's feet. Luo Qing looked toward the throne. The Harbingers around him reacted with faint amusement. A girl hummed a tune, the doctor swirled a vial of liquid, Pulcinella and Pantalone exchanged knowing smirks, and the marionette closed her eyes as though disinterested. Only Arlecchino maintained a calm gaze, her expression unreadable. It seemed, to them, this fight was merely entertainment, regardless of whether Luo Qing won or lost. Glancing at the spear at his feet, Luo Qing hesitated. With so many eyes on him, if he defeated Child too easily, it would embarrass his colleague in front of everyone. This is the final step, Child said quietly, summoning a pair of dual blades as he descended the steps. It was clear he had been looking forward to this. The Tsaritsa's divine presence still lingered, and Child intended to use this chance to fight Luo Qing before the opportunity slipped away. Luo Qing fell silent and looked toward Pierrot, standing beside the throne. Pierrot offered no words, his expression stoic, silently approving the duel. Well then. Luo Qing muttered, shaking his head as he motioned for his 4 subordinates to step back. Natalia and the others quickly retreated to a corner. They weren't worried. Unlike Child, they knew the full extent of their master's strength. After all, Luo Qing had once sparred evenly with the Raiden Shogun. Luo Qing picked up the deep purple spear and held it lightly, his gaze meeting Child's. Good resolve. Now, show me what you're really made of, Child said, advancing slowly. Suddenly, he accelerated, twin blades slicing toward Luo Qing in a blur of speed, closing the gap in an instant. Child's plan was clear: overwhelm Luo Qing before he could deploy his emotional manipulation abilities. But things didn't go as he expected. The moment he neared, Luo Qing moved at a speed far surpassing his own. With a casual sweep of his spear, he deflected the attack effortlessly. Child, we haven't even called the start yet. Don't you think a sneak attack is a bit underhanded? Luo Qing said, his golden eyes glinting. The sudden exchange caught the Harbingers off guard, piquing their interest. They had assumed Luo Qing's strength lay solely in emotional manipulation, with little physical combat prowess. During the previous selection process, Luo Qing had relied on his emotion manipulation cards to achieve victory, annoying everyone in the process. Many had considered his methods cheap, even underhanded. But now, his swift counter and the golden glow in his eyes made them re-evaluate his capabilities. This guy. He was strong in combat, too. Several Harbingers turned to Arlecchino, their gazes questioning, "Where did you find him?" "Don't look at me. He's no longer under my charge," Arlecchino said flatly. Yet her gaze lingered on Luo Qing, a faint glimmer of expectation in her eyes. She wanted to see just how much he had grown since leaving her care. Impressive reflexes. Child tightened his grip on his blades, his expression now serious. "Then, I suppose it's time I stop holding back." Dark purple lightning erupted around him as Child floated into the air. When the light faded, he stood clad in his foul legacy transformation. Even knowing he might lose, Child would treat every duel with utmost seriousness. "Show me your true strength." Child bellowed, ready to charge. But before he could, Luo Qing vanished from sight. A moment later, Child felt a sharp pain in his abdomen and was sent flying, crashing into the steps beneath the throne. "Now!" Luo Qing's voice echoed through the hall. "Am I qualified?" Chapter 182, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 182. The grand hall fell into a deafening silence. Child, battered and bruised, struggled to sit up from the rubble. His foul legacy transformation had been forcibly dispelled by Luo Qing's strike. The transformation had already taken a toll on his body, but Luo Qing's blow exacerbated the damage. Pain racked his insides, and a thin trickle of blood stained the corner of his mouth. Yet, the other Harbingers displayed no reaction to his defeat. After all, the duel had been Child's idea, it had nothing to do with them. "Well, it seems we've gained another powerful colleague," Pulcinella remarked, stepping toward Luo Qing with a smile. "This is truly something to celebrate. I look forward to working with you, Brighella." Already trying to win him over, Mayor? With your close ties to Child, shouldn't you be more concerned about him? He doesn't look too well, Pantalone quipped, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, the ceremony's over. I have some bank matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave." With that, Pantalone descended the stairs, walking past Child without a glance, and exited the hall. Hum. Columbina hummed a light tune as she skipped past Child, her fingers trailing a faint glow that settled over him. Without a word, she left the hall as well. Following their example, the remaining Harbingers exchanged pleasantries with Luo Qing before departing one by one. Capitano expressed an interest in sparring with Luo Qing someday, while Daughtry was curious about the mechanics behind his ability to manipulate emotions. Unfortunately, Luo Qing didn't fully understand it himself. As Arlecchino passed by, she met Luo Qing's gaze briefly and said in a low voice, "When you have time, come back to the hearth." Before reaching independence, all children under Arlecchino's care including Luo Qing had only one home, the hearth of the fireplace. Luo Qing replied softly. Even now, as equals, he couldn't help but admire the madwoman. Her sharp gaze and commanding presence were captivating. Perhaps, if the opportunity arose, she could join Rosalind under his command. The thought of having her glare at him with disdain while, well, the possibilities were endless. As the Harbingers left, only Child, still sitting amidst the rubble, and Pierrot, standing by the throne, remained in the hall. And, of course, Luo Qing's 4 trembling subordinates, huddled in a corner. Luo Qing hesitated before walking over to Child. With a thought, he tossed a supreme restoration pill his way. "Here. Take it. It'll help you recover faster." Child caught the pill, examining the mud ball-sized object in his hand with a raised brow. "Is this pity? Think whatever you want. Take it or leave it," Luo Qing replied casually, glancing at Pierrot. Pierrot returned the look, then descended from the throne with measured steps. "Child, explain the remaining formalities to Brighella," Pierrot said flatly before leaving the hall as well. "Tch. Looks like it's just the two of us now," Child grumbled, rolling the pill between his fingers. Our colleagues really are a heartless bunch, hey. He paused, then looked back at Luo Qing. How do you even eat this thing? Swallow it whole. What? After dismissing his subordinates, Luo Qing left the Zapoliarni palace with Child. The formalities Pierrot had referred to were essentially an overview of the rights and responsibilities that came with being a harbinger. Despite Child's questionable ability to articulate such things, Luo Qing managed to grasp the essentials. As a harbinger, he now had partial command over Fatui forces, a set budget for operations, and certain KPIs he was expected to meet. Snezhnia didn't support freeloaders, not even among its elite. Each harbinger was expected to excel in their area of expertise. Pulcinella handled governance, Pantalone oversaw the Northland Bank, Daughtery advanced research, and Arlecchino managed espionage. For those whose expertise lay in combat, like Child, Capitano, or Rosalind, their role was to serve as frontline warriors. Luo Qing's strengths were in emotional manipulation and deception, supplemented by solid combat ability. This positioned him as a frontline disruptor perfect for sowing chaos. While the idea of battling archons and other divine beings sounded daunting, Child described the role of a Fatui envoy as surprisingly comfortable. No political scheming, fewer annoying tasks, and the opportunity to build a loyal following. Anyway, that's the gist of what Pierrot wanted me to tell you, Child said, patting his stomach. He still seemed amused by the odd sensation of swallowing the Supreme Restoration pill whole. Now, you've got 3 options, Sumuru, Fontaine, or Natlan. All 3 have operations in progress, so you'd be joining as a second in command. No chance of taking the lead. He paused before adding, of course, there's also the Abyss. The rewards come fast there, but Pierrot might not approve of it. Just these 3? Luo Qing asked. Where else? Her Majesty already has the gnosis from Liyue and Mondstadt. The Raiden Shogun's gnosis is in Scaramouche's hands. If not these places, where would you go? Child's tone was casual, as if the answer should be obvious. Luo Qing thought for a moment before answering. Mondstadt. To fish. +1 frustration value from Child. As a hard-working and dedicated member of the Fatui, Child clearly struggled to understand Luo Qing's carefree attitude. He frowned in mild disdain. You've just joined us. If you don't make an effort to prove yourself, Her Majesty won't take you seriously. Ah. I'm not too worried about that, Luo Qing replied with a smirk. He was already certain that his emotion manipulation tools had no effect on the Tsaritsa. But his affection boost Pro Max card? That might be a different story. Not that he was eager to test it, not after what happened with the Raiden Shogun. Just decide quickly. Her Majesty doesn't tolerate slackers, Child said, his tone firm. As he felt the effects of the pill rapidly healing his injuries, even old wounds from using the foul legacy transformation, Child glanced at Luo Qing once more. Thanks for the pill. I owe you one. If you're ever in Liyue and need help, let me know. With that, Child gave Luo Qing a hearty pat on the shoulder and vanished into the snowy landscape. Luo Qing shook his head with a faint smile. Child, hey? He's surprisingly straightforward for someone in this madhouse. He began walking toward his apartment, pondering his options. Until he made a decision, he could at least enjoy some peaceful days at home with Rosalind and Makoto, fishing. As he approached the building and looked up at his modest 2-bedroom unit, Luo Qing sighed nostalgically. Just as he reached the door, a voice came from the shadows nearby. Care for a chat? Chapter 183, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 183. Luo Qing turned around to find Arlecchino leaning casually against the wall, her white cloak matching his own. Her composed demeanor didn't mask the lethal intent in her gaze, a look that made Luo Qing's pulse quicken slightly. He found himself enjoying that gaze. Damn it! Has Arlecchino-sama been waiting long? Luo Qing asked politely. There's no need for formalities between colleagues. Just call me Arlecchino, she replied, stepping closer to him. She glanced at his 2-bedroom apartment, raising an eyebrow. So, this is where you live now? Luo Qing followed her gaze, quickly realizing her intention. She wanted to go inside. His heart sank. Rosalind and Makoto were inside, and if Arlecchino discovered them, he'd have to accelerate his plans. Yes, that's right. Though, Arlecchino-sama, didn't you ask me to visit the hearth? Why now? Before he could finish, Arlecchino had already started walking toward the stairs leading to his apartment door. Let's talk here, she said, her voice steady. It's been a long time since we last met. Let's catch up. By the time she finished speaking, Arlecchino was already standing at his door, glancing back at him as if to say, "Well? Aren't you going to open it?" Luo Qing sighed inwardly. He knew Arlecchino too well. If he tried to deflect and suggest another location, she'd grow suspicious. She might even send people to investigate, eventually uncovering the truth. And Luo Qing knew this process intimately because he used to do it for her. Resigned, he walked to the door and unlocked it, saying, "My place is a bit messy. I hope Arlecchino-sama doesn't mind." "I don't," she said curtly. The door clicked open. As the room came into view, Arlecchino was greeted by a peculiar sight. Two women, dressed in Inajimon kimonos and wearing fox masks, stood in the entryway. They bowed politely to Luo Qing and Arlecchino. Arlecchino's gaze flicked toward Luo Qing, her eyes silently asking, "Who are they?" "Oh, these are my personal attendants from Inajima," Luo Qing said, laughing nervously. "They've been quite useful, so I brought them back with me." Arlecchino looked him up and down, a hint of disdain flashing across her face. "Remember to exercise moderation," she muttered as she stepped inside. "Yes, I'll keep that in mind," Luo Qing replied, stealing a glance at Rosalind and Makoto, who had prudently donned their masks upon hearing him return with a guest. Thank goodness for their vigilance. If they'd been caught unprepared and Arlecchino had seen their faces, well, it would have been quite the coincidence for her to end up with such good fortune. The interior of the apartment had been transformed into a traditional Inajimon style by Makoto over the past few days. Arlecchino removed her shoes and took a seat opposite Luo Qing on the tatami mat. Rosalind and Makoto tactfully served tea and snacks before retreating to a corner of the room in silence. Arlecchino sipped her tea, glancing briefly at the two women. "I heard from Rosalind that you helped her carry out the retrieval mission in Inajima." "I did," Luo Qing replied, feigning curiosity. "Why bring that up now, Arlecchino-sama?" "The Tsaritsa declared Rosalind dead, and even her bestowed divine powers dissipated with her," Arlecchino said in a measured tone. "But according to my sources, someone resembling Rosalind was spotted in Inajima on the day of the incident." Luo Qing swallowed hard, leaning back slightly in a calculated gesture of confusion. "Really? That's news to me. Are you sure your sources weren't mistaken? You know how my information network works." "Right." Luo Qing muttered, falling silent. As a former spy under Arlecchino, he knew her intelligence protocols well. Each report went through rigorous verification, leaving little room for error by the time it reached her. He had anticipated that Arlecchino might have agents in Inajima. What he hadn't expected was for those agents to catch a glimpse of Rosalind during her escape with Natalia and the others. "So?" Arlecchino's voice broke his thoughts. Her sharp eyes locked onto his. "Do you have any leads on this?" Luo Qing raised an eyebrow and glanced fleetingly at Rosalind before feigning ignorance. "No idea," he said with a shrug. "Really?" Arlecchino's lips curved into a faint smile. "Well, no matter. Just rumors, after all. No need to dwell on them." Then, her tone softened slightly. "I'm intrigued by your abilities. Interested in joining me in Fontaine?" Luo Qing hesitated, caught off guard. "So, she's here to recruit me? Then why bring up Rosalind at all?" Feigning indecision, he said, "Arlecchino-sama, the doctor also approached me about going to Sumeru. What do you think of that?" "Him?" Arlecchino snorted, her distaste evident. "You know what he's like. Whatever he offers, the price you'll pay is always far greater. But," she added, rising to put on her shoes, "you're no longer under my command. The choice is yours." She glanced at him as she adjusted her shoes. "I'll be returning to Fontaine soon. If you decide, visit the hearth." Luo Qing's gaze lingered on her shoes for a moment, a strange impulse stirring within him. "Arlecchino-sama, leaving already? Why not stay a bit longer? My attendants are quite skilled, perhaps they could offer you a massage before you go." "No need," she replied curtly, heading for the door. As Luo Qing prepared to escort her out, Arlecchino suddenly stopped and turned toward Rosalind. With a flick of her wrist, she removed Rosalina's fox mask. Chapter 184, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 184. "Is there something you require of me?" Rosalind lowered her head, speaking softly. At that moment, she hadn't revealed her true appearance. When Arlecchino entered, Rosalind had used the illusion mask gifted to her by Luo Qing, disguising herself as a nondescript woman from Inajima. Still, pretending to be a mere servant in front of someone who used to be her colleague left a bitter taste in her mouth. But what choice did she have? She belonged to Luo Qing now. Arlecchino-sama. Luo Qing feigned ignorance. He had been mere seconds away from knocking her out cold. Thankfully, Rosaline's vigilance had paid off, and she'd used the illusion mask. Arlecchino scrutinized Rosaline's disguise. Though her physique bore some resemblance to Rosaline's, her aura and demeanor were entirely different. After a long pause, Arlecchino seemed to dismiss the matter, her voice calm. Nothing. I was just curious about your attendance. Luo Qing resisted the urge to roll his eyes. That's the flimsiest excuse I've ever heard. And? What does Arlecchino-sama think of her appearance? Mediocre. +1 frustration value from Rosalind. Arlecchino didn't seem inclined to press further. She gave Luo Qing a final glance before heading toward the door. Luo Qing followed her out for a few symbolic steps before returning to the apartment. Once the doors were securely locked, he sat back on the tatami mat and exhaled. Crisis averted. You can take off the masks now. As he spoke, Rosalind deactivated her illusion mask, and Makoto removed her fox mask. Who was that woman? Makoto asked, her tone puzzled. One of my colleagues, another harbinger. She's a bit unhinged, Luo Qing replied succinctly. Then, something occurred to him. Wait a second, Makoto. Didn't you foresee the future? How do you not know about her? I'm Inajima's Archon, not a god of time. My foresight is limited to events tied to Inajima. Makoto pouted, muttering, what good am I to you, then? Excuse me. Annoyed, Makoto pointed at the cards on the table and huffed. I saw your cards earlier. You were going to lose, and yet you bailed mid-game. That was official business. I had no choice. Luo Qing protested, his tone righteous. He turned to Rosalind, his expression growing serious. Speaking of which, Rosalind, you know how Arlecchino operates. While she's still in Snezhnia, be extra cautious. Yes, Master, Rosalind said respectfully. Master, has Her Majesty granted you divine authority yet? She has. With a thought, Luo Qing retrieved the weeping comedy mask from his system's inventory and placed it on the table. He glanced between Makoto and Rosalind, his mind churning. Child had told him that harbingers could establish their own personal battalions independent of the Fatui's regular forces. These units would follow his direct orders, granted unique privileges, and move freely within Snezhnia. Considering that Rosalind and Makoto were supposed to be dead, disguises would be necessary for them to move about. Luo Qing began to formulate a plan, have his followers wear custom masks, modeled after Rosaline's and Makoto's, and register them as part of his personal battalion. This would make it easier to assign them tasks without arousing suspicion. With a flick of his hand, Luo Qing shaped a set of masks using geo-elements and laid them on the table. Some resembled Tengu masks from Inajima, others bore dragon-like features inspired by Liyue. One even mirrored his weeping comedy mask. What do you think of these designs? He asked. None of them look good, Makoto said, shaking her head. Whatever you decide, Master, Rosalind replied quietly, bowing her head. Tisk. Rosalind, you're so gentle now, it's kind of unsettling, Luo Qing teased, ruffling her hair. Rosalind remained silent, allowing him to stroke her head. Since her resurrection, she felt her once agitated temperament had calmed significantly, replaced by an unusual serenity. I'll arrange with headquarters to designate these masks as the official symbol of my battalion, Luo Qing said. This way, you'll be free to move about without worrying about Fatui agents identifying you. Are you sure you don't want to choose a different design? None of them look good anyway, Makoto said dismissively. Perhaps, Master, Rosalind suggested, you could base the design on the mask Her Majesty granted you. My mask. Luo Qing glanced at the weeping comedy mask. Unlike the other harbingers' masks, which only partially obscured their faces, his covered his entire face. Admittedly, the mask did exude a certain gravitas, a perfect representation of an intimidating figure. All right, I'll head to headquarters and have them produce a batch. He stood and moved toward the door. Stay on high alert. Arlecchino seems to have her eye on you too. Don't let her discover anything. Yes, master. Got it. At the Fatui headquarters, Luo Qing quickly finalized the registration of his personal battalion's insignia. The logistics department began producing masks based on the Weeping Comedy mask, each with slight variations to differentiate them while maintaining a cohesive design. With his tasks complete, Luo Qing was about to head home for some well-earned leisure time when he reached the entrance hall and found his path blocked. Standing before him was the doctor. Well, what a coincidence, Brighella, Daughtry said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. His demeanor radiated calm confidence. Daughtry-sama. What brings you here? Luo Qing asked with a polite smile, though inwardly, he bristled. Among all the harbingers, he had the least favorable impression of the doctor. Daughtry's reputation as a mad scientist wasn't undeserved, his penchant for using soldiers as experimental subjects even if it didn't kill them left a sour taste in many mouths. Didn't I mention it during the Tsaritsa's audience? Daughtry's grin widened. I find your abilities fascinating. Interested in collaborating. Collaboration. Luo Qing's tone was light-hearted. You're not planning to dissect me, are you? Because if that's the case, I'll have to decline. Ha, your humor is much sharper than Arlecchino's, Daughtry replied, unperturbed by the subtle jab. For an experiment subject of your caliber, dissection would be far too crude. Your emotional manipulation aligns closely with one of my research topics. I know a place where I might be able to help you refine your abilities even further. Oh. Luo Qing feigned curiosity. And where might that be, Daughtry-sama? The doctor's smirk deepened. Sumeru. Chapter 185, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 185. Sumeru. Luo Qing feigned a surprised expression. He hadn't expected that, after becoming a full-fledged harbinger, both Arlecchino and Daughtry would try to recruit him. Was this a coincidence, or had Pierrot orchestrated it behind the scenes? I'm conducting a grand experiment with Scaramouche, Daughtry explained, painting a tempting picture. If you join us, the results could be even more extraordinary. An experiment? Luo Qing acted puzzled, though he was well aware of what Daughtry was referring to. The Academia's God Creation Project? Old news. I'm not exactly cut from the same cloth as those pedantic scholars at the Academia, Luo Qing said, masking his knowledge. Are you sure I'll be of any use, Daughtry-sama? Despite knowing the ins and outs, Luo Qing played the role of the naive newcomer. He had only recently become a harbinger, so the longer he could keep up the pretense of being a clueless rookie, the more advantages he could leverage. Of course. Daughtry's confidence was unshakable. I'll send detailed information to you soon. In half a month, I'll be returning to Sumeru. Please give it serious thought. He gave Luo Qing's shoulder a firm pat and walked off before Luo Qing could respond. Watching Daughtry's confident and almost theatrical departure, Luo Qing sank into thought. At this point, there was no news at all from Natlan regarding the Pyro Archon's gnosis. Should he team up with Arlecchino and Fontaine, strike while the iron was hot, and work toward eventually bringing her under his command? Or should he follow Daughtry to Sumeru, seize the opportunity to interact with the adorable Lesser Lord Quzanali, and maybe even, would the greater Lord Rukhadevata still be around somehow? Such difficult choices. Shaking his head, Luo Qing decided to head home and consult Makoto. After all, her visions of the future might offer some useful guidance. Arriving at his doorstep, Luo Qing instinctively scanned the surroundings. After ensuring there were no spies lurking about, he unlocked the door and stepped inside. The sight that greeted him stopped him in his tracks. In the center of the tatami-floored living room, Makoto sat on one side with Rosalind standing silently behind her. On the opposite side, Teresa knelt on the floor, her head bowed so low it nearly touched the ground. Her entire posture radiated fear. Hearing the door open, all three turned their gazes toward Luo Qing. What's going on here? Luo Qing asked, bewildered. She seems to have made a copy of your house key after dinner last time. Thinking no one was home, she let herself in. Makoto crossed her arms and spoke calmly, though her gaze seemed to silently ask. Want me to make her forget this ever happened? Hey! Luo Qing's face darkened as he turned to Teresa. You guard against thieves all day, but who guards against their own people? Teresa shivered, feeling a chill run down her spine. She immediately shifted to face him fully, bowing so deeply her forehead nearly touched his feet. Luo Qing-sama, I was wrong. I let my impulses get the better of me and accidentally stumbled upon the general's true identity. Please, don't kill me to silence me, I have a family to care for. You're an orphan, Luo Qing interjected. Teresa gulped, then quickly slid forward on her knees and grabbed Luo Qing's leg, crying out pitifully. Luo Qing-sama, please spare me. I'll do anything for you, be your servant, your horse, anything you want. I promise not to tell Natalia or anyone else. Her original plan had been to sneak in and steal something personal from Luo Qing to bring back and appreciate later. What she hadn't expected was to open the door and walk straight into Makoto, who looked exactly like the Raiden Shogun and Rosalind playing cards in the living room. The two women had stared at her in silence for a brief moment. Then, with a grace honed by years of service as the Tsaritsa's former tool, Rosalind had subdued her effortlessly and waited for Luo Qing's return. Let go, Luo Qing said, a trace of disgust in his voice. You're so kind, my lord. Teresa cried in relief, letting go and scooting back to her original position. She knew Luo Qing well enough to understand that if he hadn't punished her immediately, he wasn't planning to pursue the matter further. Hand over the key. Teresa fidgeted. All right. Reluctantly, she reached into her shirt, rummaged for a moment, and pulled out a small metal key. Luo Qing blinked, momentarily at a loss for words. Her chest is barely a B cup, maybe AC on a good day, and she managed to hide a key there? This happens again, and you're out. Got it? Luo Qing warned. Though he had plans to eventually let his subordinates in on Makoto's existence, he preferred to do so on his terms, not by accident. Understood. Teresa replied weakly. Though she wore an expression of remorse, inwardly, she couldn't help but wonder why her sneaky schemes always seemed to end in her getting caught. That's it? Makoto asked from the sidelines, her tone perplexed. She had expected Luo Qing to punish Teresa more harshly. After all, breaking into a superior's home and attempting to steal something was a serious offense. In Inajima, such an act would have landed her in prison or worse. You're way too soft on her. What else do you want me to do? Luo Qing asked, noticing the look of disdain in Makoto's eyes. Settling in the middle of the tea table, he continued, let's get back to the real topic here. He explained Dotteri's and Arlecchino's invitations and then turned to Makoto. So, in the future you've seen, where do I go? How should I know? Sumeru and Fontaine aren't under Inajima's jurisdiction, Makoto replied casually. Wow, some prophet you are. Ask you anything, and you're clueless, Luo Qing muttered, unimpressed. Humph. Makoto sniffed indignantly before smirking. I do know one thing, when you hold your wedding, you'll have so many brides that 2 hands won't be enough to count them. How's that for a prophecy? Luo Qing froze. That many brides? Am I really that much of a scumbag? From her spot in the corner, Teresa hesitantly raised her hand. General Sama, am I one of the brides? Luo Qing turned to look at her, unsure how to respond. Oh. Makoto's gaze flickered between the two of them, her tone teasing. What do you think? Ahem. Luo Qing cleared his throat, steering the conversation back on track. Let's focus. We have 2 options before us, Sumeru or Fontaine. This is likely Pierrot's plan, so where should we go? He wasn't familiar with either region, making it difficult to decide. However, if he wanted to stick to the timeline, Sumeru seemed like the more logical choice. Rosalind raised her hand slightly and spoke respectfully. I have some knowledge of Sumeru. If Master chooses to go there, I could offer some assistance. Although Sumeru held painful memories for her, her loyalty to Luo Qing took precedence. Is that so? Luo Qing studied her for a moment before nodding. All right, then. Sumeru it is. Chapter 186, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 186. Half a month had flown by in no time. After deciding to join the Sumeru Academia, Luo Qing quickly informed the doctor of his decision. Originally, Luo Qing thought the doctor would accompany him to Sumeru after 2 weeks. To his surprise, the man told him that one of his segments had already arrived in Sumeru and that Luo Qing should sail there on his own. This left Luo Qing somewhat disappointed. The journey from Snezhnaya to Sumeru would also take several months by sea. He had hoped to use this time to mess with the doctor a bit and earn some frustration value. Now, it seemed his only options were to continue tormenting Natalia and the others. One of the teleportation toilets had been left in the plain of Euthymia, meaning he couldn't use it to take a detour to Mondstadt or explore Kamisato Ayaka's bedroom during the voyage. After all, the teleportation was random, and he didn't dare gamble on the odds. If he accidentally ended up back in the plain of Euthymia, things would get ugly. 2 months passed quickly. After a long voyage, Luo Qing and his companions finally caught sight of Sumeru's landscape. Towering plants stretched high into the sky, with human structures seamlessly built into them. Sumeru had thoroughly embodied the principle of harmony between humans and nature, perfectly interpreting the saying lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets. Cough, cough. Got carried away there. Anyway. Sumeru looked very green. Very eco-friendly. As the ship neared the port, Luo Qing and his group stood on the outer deck. Natalia and the others, who had never been to Sumeru, stared wide-eyed at the colossal trees near the docks. Following Luo Qing's orders, everyone wore masks identical in design to his. Their identities as members of the Fatui's 12th Seat Special Task Force had been formally acknowledged by the Fatui headquarters. From now on, they were outside the regular Fatui military hierarchy. Only Luo Qing, the Tsaritsa, and Pierrot could give them orders. Sumeru. Rosalind murmured from behind Luo Qing. She had once been a student at the Academia and had hoped to return home after completing her mission to reunite with her beloved. But now. Sumeru. Even old friends are gone. Makoto sighed softly, her gaze, hidden beneath the mask, landing on Luo Qing. She and Rosalind were no exceptions, both wore replicas of the signature mask. The 6 stood behind Luo Qing, their dramatic masks exuding an eerie aura. Luo Qing, however, chose not to wear one. This peculiar ensemble drew more than a few curious glances from the Sumeru sailors at the docks. Understandably so, those grinning masks were downright unsettling. Before long, the ship docked at Port Ormus, and Luo Qing's group set foot on Sumeru soil. As they exited the harbour, a scholarly woman accompanied by guards approached. Her ears sported high-tech headphones that clashed with the rustic aesthetics of the surroundings. "Are you Mr. Brighella?" "That's me." Luo Qing nodded. As much as he disliked it, from now on, anything related to the Fatui required him to use the name Brighella. "I'm Sater, the Academia's liaison." "You may call me that." Sater greeted them politely. "Both the Grand Sage and the Doctor have been waiting for you in the workshop. It's a bit of a journey, so please follow me." With a nod to the guards, Sater cleared a path for them. "Speaking of..." Luo Qing glanced at the guards on either side, smiling. "Miss Sater, assigning so many guards, do you think we're dangerous?" "Mr. Brighella, you misunderstand," Sater replied with a calm smile. "This is merely for your protection. Bandits often prowl the wilderness in Sumeru. Even we have to be extra cautious when traveling." "Is that so?" Luo Qing chuckled but said no more. With a brief exchange of glances with his companions, he followed Sater's lead. The masked group moved through the streets, exuding an imposing aura. Still, something puzzled Luo Qing. Given Natalia and the others' usual penchant for complaints, wouldn't they normally grumble a bit in a new nation? Why were they so quiet today? Could it be because of the masks? Sumeru City. The Grand Sage Azar's workshop, along with the doctor's lab, was located outside Sumeru City. With Sater leading them and beasts of burden aiding the journey, it only took a few days to arrive. Currently, the Grand Sage ruled Sumeru City with an iron fist. Though many residents were frightened by Luo Qing's group's appearance, seeing an Academia scholar leading them prompted most to turn a blind eye, dismissing any thought of reporting them to the Matra. "Mr. Brighella, the Grand Sage has decreed that non-specialists are not permitted inside." Sater explained courteously, "From here, you and your companions must proceed on your own." "All right." Luo Qing glanced at the workshop's entrance, a metallic hallway with concealed biometric scanners. He couldn't help but wonder how Sumeru, with its current technological limitations, had managed such advanced research facilities. Or was this another case of Snezhnia's sponsorship? Gently placing his hand on the scanner, the metal door opened with a hiss. Peering inside, Luo Qing stepped forward. He hadn't walked far when a Fatui patrol approached. Initially mistaking him for an intruder, they prepared to reprimand him. But upon spotting the Harbinger's insignia on his waist, they froze. Realizing he was the Tsaritsa's newly appointed Harbinger, they immediately bowed and respectfully led him to the doctor. When Luo Qing arrived, the doctor was deep in conversation with the Grand Sage Azar and Scaramouche aka the unbearably snarky balladeer. It's been a while, Lord Daughtery. Which number segment are you now? You look quite youthful, Luo Qing quipped as he approached. Scaramouche, noticing Luo Qing, immediately scowled. Daughtery, you never mentioned this guy would be part of the plan. His tone was dripping with hostility. Though he'd only met Luo Qing a handful of times, something about the man made Scaramouche inherently dislike him. I think it's best not to treat our collaborators with such animosity, Scaramouche. The doctor glanced at the group behind Luo Qing before continuing. Brighella has exceptional emotional control, which will be invaluable to our plans. Oh. The Grand Sage Azar, who had been observing silently, raised an eyebrow. Daughtery, can he truly control her completely? Her. Luo Qing feigned confusion. The current Archon of Sumeru the Lesser Lord Quzanali, the doctor replied calmly. Our plan requires a significant amount of computational power, reliant on Sumeru's Akasha system. As the core of that system, the little Archon has proven somewhat resistant to control. Humph. Recently, her psychological conditioning has faltered several times, leading to fluctuations in the Akasha's processing capabilities, Azar scoffed before turning to Luo Qing. Daughtery claims your emotional manipulation skills can compel anyone to obey. Yes, Luo Qing nodded, his expression subtly betraying excitement. If they'd told me earlier that I'd be tasked with handling the little Archon, hypnotizing her, wait, that doesn't sound right either. Anyway, he was just really excited. Chapter 187, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 187. After exchanging a few words with the doctor and Azar and ignoring Scaramouche's incessant barking, Luo Qing finally understood why they had roped him into this plan. Apparently, they had grown so accustomed to psychologically manipulating their dear little Archon that they failed to notice her beginning to awaken. Recently, she had even started peeking into the world through others' dreams via the Akasha system. Since the system relied heavily on her computational power, this wasn't just a minor inconvenience. If their psychological games ever stopped working and the little Archon fully woke up, their grand plans would fall apart entirely. That was where Luo Qing, with his expertise in mental manipulation, came into play. Their intent? Hand over the task of keeping the Archon asleep to him. No more peeking into dreams, no more waking up. Azar is such a scumbag. Wait. Didn't I agree to this too? Ugh, I must be brain dead. So, after all that talking. Luo Qing paused, glancing at Scaramouche, who was nearly 2 heads shorter than him, and casually added, this isn't even my workplace, and someone here clearly doesn't welcome me. Now, can I go meet the little Archon you've been tormenting? Who are you calling someone? Scaramouche frowned, his tone hostile. He didn't even know why, but every time he saw Luo Qing, he was reminded of that woman. And it pissed him off. Who knows? Luo Qing replied with feigned innocence. Whoever's almost 2 heads shorter than me. Scaramouche fell silent. It wasn't his fault he was short, but Luo Qing had to use that against him. You've only just become a harbinger, and already you're courting death. Scaramouche's gaze turned icy, murderous intent radiating from him. Oh. Luo Qing smirked, leaning in slightly. I've already put your mom and sister in their places before. Dealing with you, a rebellious brat, is child's play. All right, you two, the doctor interjected, his voice calm but firm. I didn't call you here to bicker. Even he couldn't quite understand why these two were always at each other's throats. Didn't they cooperate just fine back in Inajima? Humph. Scaramouche scoffed and strode deeper into the workshop. In the distance, a massive purple arm resembling a giant's could be seen suspended in the air, mid-assembly. As the tension dissipated, the doctor turned to Azar and said evenly, well then, I'll leave my colleague in your hands, Azar. Azar's gaze swept over Luo Qing, his expression unreadable. Follow me, he said curtly, turning to lead the way without waiting for a response. TCH, you academic types always look down your noses at people, don't you? Luo Qing snarked at the doctor with a grin. So, what's in it for me? Oh. The doctor raised an eyebrow in mock surprise. Are you saying that the opportunity to freely manipulate a god's mind without fear of consequences isn't reward enough? Luo Qing was momentarily speechless. He had to admit, Daughtery really knew him well. With a faint smile, Luo Qing gave the doctor a knowing look before gesturing for his subordinates to follow Azar. Well, I suppose I should go check out, assess the Little Archon's situation first. Sanctuary of Surasthana. As the Little Archon's residence, the Sanctuary of Surasthana was one of the most heavily guarded places in Sumeru. To the common people, it was said that the young Lesser Lord Quzanali had lived there ever since the disappearance of the Greater Lord Rukhadevata. No one without clearance could enter, and so almost no one knew how the Archon truly lived within. With Azar leading the way, even Luo Qing's unusual entourage didn't face any resistance from the guards. Given Azar's immense authority, anyone who dared offend him might as well quit their position at the Academia. Before long, the group stepped inside the sanctuary. Unlike the game's depiction, the sanctuary wasn't just a central hall. After weaving through a labyrinth of corridors, Luo Qing finally laid eyes on the true Lesser Lord Quzanali. Her snow-white hair was tied in a ponytail, her petite frame radiated an unmatched gentleness, and her adorable face paired perfectly with her small, chubby legs and tiny feet. So cute! Unfortunately, the Little Archon's undeniable charm was overshadowed by the energy barrier imprisoning her. Her eyes were shut, and she seemed to be in a deep slumber. She has woken up a few times recently, Azar explained slowly. Using the power of the Akasha, she infiltrated others' dreams. The God creation plan is at its most critical stage. During this time, we require immense computational power from the Akasha. If she wakes again, it will severely disrupt our progress. Azar glanced at Luo Qing, his eyes filled with doubt. Frankly, I don't trust the abilities of you Fatui Harbingers. If you're incapable, just say so and stop wasting our time. He turned to leave, but Luo Qing's voice stopped him. Something else. Azar frowned, clearly impatient. I've heard, Luo Qing said with a smile, that you're the most powerful man in Sumeru, second only to the Archon. Get to the point. Azar's brows furrowed further. Luo Qing's words, though crude, were not entirely untrue. Still, he found the bluntness distasteful. Well, Daughtery didn't offer me anything for this job. If you're also unwilling to show some goodwill, I might find it difficult to get motivated. Luo Qing feigned a troubled expression. Azar was silent for a moment. As expected, the Fatui were always greedy. What do you want? Nothing too extravagant, Luo Qing said with a grin. I heard the Academia's academic environment has been declining recently. I may not be a scholar, but I know a thing or two about improving morale. Would the esteemed Grand Sage, perhaps offer me a position? Azar was momentarily stunned. He had seen people ask for money, jewels, rare materials, even resources. But asking for a job? That was new. A position will be arranged for you, Azar replied tersely before leaving without another word. Ha, that was quicker than I expected. Luo Qing smirked as he watched Azar's retreating figure. Turning back, his gaze fell on the imprisoned Lesser Lord Quzanali. Are you really going to help them? Makoto stepped up beside Luo Qing, her voice low. After witnessing Azar's arrogance firsthand, she had been seething with anger, barely holding herself back out of respect for Luo Qing. Of course not, Luo Qing replied casually. But helping this adorable little Archon? Well, I'll need to collect some compensation for that, don't you think? Chapter 188, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable 188. The next morning, Azar fulfilled Luo Qing's request. At the crack of dawn, he had someone escort Luo Qing to the Academia. There, Luo Qing was given an honorary position as a special consultant to the Matra. This allowed him unrestricted access to the Academia and even authority to command the Matra to apprehend scholars guilty of academic misconduct. In exchange, Azar demanded Luo Qing expedite his efforts to manipulate the Little Archon's emotions. But with some clever excuses about the complexity of a god's psyche and the time needed, Luo Qing managed to delay the matter. That day, Luo Qing assigned Natalia and the others to scout the environment around Sumeru City, leaving only Rosalind disguised as an ordinary citizen by his side. He intended to test out the new position Azar had arranged for him and see if it might provide opportunities to collect frustration value. The Akasha network connected nearly all the residents of Sumeru City. If utilized properly, it could become a steady source of value for him. Being punctual on the first day of work was important, of course. Early in the morning, Luo Qing arrived at the Academia with Rosalind in tow. Before they even entered, Sater, the scholar who had previously guided him to the purification workshop, was already waiting in the plaza outside. When she saw Luo Qing approach, she hurried forward to greet him. Mr. Brighella, the Grand Sage has arranged your position. Please follow me. Sater bowed politely and then led Luo Qing and Rosalind into the Academia. Compared to the harmonious simplicity of Sumeru City, the Academia was grand and elegant, as though its gates marked the boundary between two entirely different worlds. After navigating a series of winding corridors, Sater stopped in front of a somewhat secluded room. Mr. Brighella, please head inside. Someone will explain the duties of a matra to you. With that, Sater turned and left without another word. A superior, hey! Luo Qing muttered to himself. Could it be that person? Rosalind, ever attentive, stepped forward and opened the door for him. The office was decently spacious, with only a single desk and chair set in the center. Seated in the chair was a pale-skinned, white-haired man wearing a wolf-shaped mask. His upper body was nearly bare, radiating an aura of cold indifference. Upon seeing Luo Qing enter, the man frowned slightly, his expression tinged with displeasure. You're the special consultant sent by the Grand Sage. It didn't take much to guess this was almost certainly another one of Azar's cronies, planted to extend his influence within the Academia. Luo Qing nodded, his gaze dropping to the space under the desk. There, he noticed that despite sitting down, this pale-skinned man still had to stretch his toes to reach the floor. After a brief pause, Luo Qing commented matter-of-factly, "You're awfully short. +1 frustration value from Sino." "I am Sino, General Mahamatra," the man responded coldly, his voice laced with warning. "Regardless of your intentions here, if you dare violate the rules of the Matra, I will not tolerate it even if you're Azar's man." Sino stood abruptly, his icy demeanor as sharp as a blade. Striding up to Luo Qing, he made no mention of the height remark, instead pointing to a stack of documents on the desk. "The rules you need to know are there. Read them yourself. I don't have time to babysit a political appointee." With that, Sino turned on his heel and stormed out, clearly unwilling to spend another second in Luo Qing's company. It was evident the height comment had hit a sore spot. "TCH, not the friendliest, is he?" Luo Qing shrugged, unfazed. He stepped into the office and sat in the chair Sino had vacated without needing to stretch his toes to touch the ground. On the desk was a specialized Akasha terminal for the Matra, along with a stack of documents detailing the rules Sino had mentioned. Beside them lay a neatly folded Matra uniform. As Rosalind entered, she busied herself preparing tea while Luo Qing casually flipped through the rulebook. Most of it was standard, guidelines on violations and corresponding punishments. A few pages in, Luo Qing lost interest. In Liyue and Inajima, he had to tread carefully because gods were still present. But Sumeru had no adult deity. If he decided to go wild, no one could stop him. The rules? He'd follow them if he felt like it. After finishing the tea Rosalind made, Luo Qing grew restless. He donned the Matra uniform and decided to take a stroll around the Academia to see if he could stir up any frustration value. Luo Qing and Rosalind wandered through the Academia several times. Whenever scholars spotted Luo Qing in his uniform, they instinctively stepped aside to let him pass. After countless loops, Luo Qing hadn't encountered a single interesting target. Just as he was about to give up and head back, hurried footsteps sounded from behind him. "Excuse me, Mr. Matra, do you have a moment?" The voice was soft and a bit listless, as if its owner lacked energy. Turning around, Luo Qing saw a girl with curly, ash-blue hair standing before him, looking up with wide, tired eyes. Her petite face was delicate and adorable, though marred by dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. "Oh!" While the girl seemed devoid of spirit, Luo Qing immediately perked up, rubbing his hands together in excitement. "Miss, if there's anything troubling you, feel free to let me know." My name is Layla." Startled by Luo Qing's enthusiasm, Layla shrank back slightly, her voice soft and hesitant. "It's about my thesis." "A thesis? Did someone plagiarize you?" Luo Qing's tone turned stern as he grasped her small hand. "Tell me everything, and I'll see that justice is served." This was a golden opportunity for frustration value, he couldn't let it slip away. "And no, that's not it." Flustered, Layla pulled her hand back and took a few steps away. "It's just, something strange keeps happening when I'm working on it." Lowering her head, she continued in a timid voice. "I've been staying up late every night to work on my thesis. But every time, even though I don't finish, I wake up the next morning to find it somehow completed. My classmates say, maybe I've been possessed by the ghosts of students who couldn't finish their theses before they died. Her voice grew quieter and her head drooped lower with each word. Mr. Matra, can you help me? Of course, I'll help. Luo Qing declared enthusiastically. He had a pretty good idea of what was going on, but he wasn't about to spoil the fun so soon. How about this, he suggested with a grin. Tonight, find a place to continue working on your thesis. I'll stay with you. If any ghosts show up to haunt you, I'll deal with them personally. How does that sound? Layla hesitated, glancing at Luo Qing's Matra uniform. Despite feeling overwhelmed by his energy, she couldn't deny the reliability associated with the Matra. After a moment of deliberation, she nodded softly. All right, let's do that. Chapter 189, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable 189. Deciding to stay the night with Layla, Luo Qing didn't hesitate for a moment. He quickly sent Rosalind home with the excuse, "You've had a long day. Go back and rest, maybe play some cards with Makoto." No ulterior motives there, he just preferred working without an audience. For some reason, though, Luo Qing found himself unable to resist girls with cryo-visions. Could that fortune-telling he did for himself years ago really have been true? Evening. After spending the day assisting Layla with various tasks, the two began searching for a quiet place for her to work on her thesis. Unexpectedly, Layla suggested her home as the perfect spot for uninterrupted writing. Excuse me. Stepping into Layla's room, even Luo Qing, seasoned scoundrel that he was, felt a little unsettled. This girl had no sense of self-preservation at all. She even let him into her bedroom? Was the Matra uniform really that trustworthy? If she fell asleep and he lost control? Ha! Mr. Luo Qing, please have a seat. I'll get you some tea. Exhausted from the day's activities, Layla wobbled as she fetched a pot of tea. She set it on the desk before speaking softly. I'll just start working on my thesis. I still have several papers to submit. With that, she shuffled over to her desk and began writing diligently. Luo Qing sat on Layla's bed, the faint fragrance of her bedding filling the air. His gaze drifted to her petite frame and long, curly hair, and his heart felt a twinge of unease. This was a girl's private room. And it was their first meeting. What a sin! Though Luo Qing had been in Kamisato Ayaka's room before and even shared an intimate moment with her, it didn't feel as morally weighty as this. Just as his thoughts began to wander, a sudden thud broke his reverie. Turning his head, Luo Qing saw that Layla had fallen asleep at her desk, her face resting on her papers. A small trickle of drool slid from her lips onto her thesis. Ah, the resilience of youth! Falling asleep just like that. Luo Qing hesitated, wondering whether he should wake her up. Before he could decide, Layla abruptly bolted upright, muttering to herself. Did I fall asleep this early? I must have overdone it the past few nights. Noticing the drool on her papers, she mumbled, "Oh no, I got drool on them. Now I'll have to rewrite this." Following an unfamiliar scent in the air, Layla sniffed around until her gaze landed on Luo Qing. Their eyes met. "Hello! Pervert!" Layla shrieked, summoning an orb of cryo-energy and hurling it at Luo Qing. He sidestepped effortlessly, letting the frost hit the bed, where it left shards of ice scattered across the sheets. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" Layla swung her arms, sending two more waves of cryo-energy at him. Luo Qing dodged again, the attacks tearing through the bedding and leaving several gaping holes. "My bed." Layla's voice trembled with sorrow as she glared at Luo Qing. "That's not on me," Luo Qing said, hastily shifting the blame. "You did that yourself." Standing up, Luo Qing was about to explain when Layla clutched her chest and backed against the desk. "What are you trying to do? If you don't leave, I'll call the Matra." Her voice faltered as her eyes fell on his uniform. "Oh no! I am a Matra. Go ahead, call me." +1 frustration value from Layla. Seeing Luo Qing's uniform, Layla seemed to calm down, though her face flushed red as she muttered indignantly, "Even if you're a Matra, you can't just. You invited me here." "I invited you." Layla gasped, her expression shifting as she tried to recall what her daytime self had done earlier. "You've got to be kidding." Her inner persona frowned, visibly upset by her daytime self's actions. Not only had the other Layla assumed she was haunted and called the Matra to exorcise her, but she had also brought a strange man home on their very first meeting. Even if he was a matra, that was completely reckless. Especially when he so clearly looked like trouble. I see, her inner self finally said, sitting down at the desk. Let me explain. I'm her other personality. I only come out when she's asleep. As for the thesis, I've been helping her because she's been too exhausted lately. With a dismissive wave, she added, I'm not a ghost. I don't need to be exorcised. You can leave now. Luo Qing nodded as though satisfied, then raised his head. Let me ask you something. What is it? Inner Layla tilted her head in confusion. If you remember everything your daytime self experiences, does that mean she also remembers everything you do? Luo Qing's tone was casual, but his question struck a nerve. Of course not, Inner Layla replied, rolling her eyes. I'm her hidden personality. When she's awake, I retreat deep into her subconscious. She has no idea I exist or what I do. Besides, she snorted, her expression tinged with disdain. If she remembered, do you think she'd mistake me for a ghost and bring you home? Fair point, Luo Qing mused, a smile creeping across his face. So, no matter what I do to you, she won't remember. Exactly. Wait, what? Inner Layla's posture stiffened as she shrank back toward the desk. What are you planning to do? Nothing much. Just a little punishment, Luo Qing murmured, his eyes narrowing. You're a matra! Layla exclaimed, her voice trembling. Her instincts screamed at her to flee. Luo Qing had effortlessly dodged her attacks earlier, making it clear he was far stronger than her. Fearing the worst, she hurled another cryoblast at him and darted toward the door. But before she could take more than a step, her world flipped upside down. When her vision stabilized, she found herself bound hand and foot, lying on the bed. Her fingers and toes were encased in restraints that suppressed her elemental power. Standing over her, Luo Qing loomed with a calm yet unsettling gaze. You're not a matra. What are you planning to do to me? Luo Qing smirked at her flustered and defiant expression. Leaning in closer, he whispered softly, late at night, alone in a room with a man like me. What do you think I'll do? Chapter 190, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 190. Why you, don't come any closer. Seeing Luo Qing so near, Layla instinctively shrank back. Her restrained feet pushed against the bed, scooting her body toward the edge as fear swirled in her chest. To create a perfectly quiet space for writing her thesis, Layla had ensured her room was completely soundproof. No matter how noisy the street outside got, not a single sound could penetrate the walls. But the downside was obvious: no matter how loudly she screamed, no one outside would hear her. Was she really about to be taken advantage of by this so-called matra imposter tonight? Why are you keeping your distance? Do I really look like a bad guy? Luo Qing glanced at Layla, who was curled up at the corner of the bed, clutching her knees. His voice was calm, almost teasing. You. Layla was momentarily speechless. You cuffed me without permission, took off my shoes and stockings. If you're not a bad guy, then bad guys don't exist. Relax. I'm here on your daytime self's request. I won't hurt you. Then why did you tie me up? To stop you from running, of course, Luo Qing replied matter-of-factly. And you're still claiming you're not a bad guy. What are you so afraid I'll run from? Layla instinctively scooted farther back. When did you first appear? Luo Qing asked casually. Why are you asking that? Come on, I'm here on your daytime self's behalf. Isn't it normal for me to ask? Layla stayed silent for a moment before answering in a small voice, I don't know. So, she's completely unaware of your existence. Humph, if she knew, why would she even go looking for you? Layla's tone was tinged with disdain. That makes sense. Luo Qing nodded thoughtfully, then turned to her with a smile. But I'd suggest you drop that haughty attitude when talking to me. Otherwise, I can't guarantee I won't do something to you. Luo Qing didn't have many hobbies, but disciplining sundaries was definitely one of them. And Layla's inner persona was a textbook sundara prime material for some good-natured teasing. Layla chose silence. She had no choice. Luo Qing held all the cards, and she had no power to resist. Then again, wasn't this still her own room? So, you have access to all her memories, right? Luo Qing asked abruptly. Why do you ask? Layla replied warily. I heard you're a top scholar in the academia. Let's test your biology knowledge. Luo Qing grabbed a piece of paper and a pen from her desk and continued, what's your daily routine? Any hobbies? Favorite foods? And, when's your period? +1 frustration value from Layla. Layla was dumbfounded. What kind of biology question is this? And what even is period supposed to mean? Don't know. And you call yourself an academia scholar? +1 frustration value from Layla. Why are you asking this? I'm not telling you. Layla snapped, her voice cold. These were deeply personal questions. There was no way she'd share them with someone like Luo Qing. Really not going to say. And not saying. All right. Wait, what are you? Before Layla could finish, Luo Qing grabbed her small foot and dragged her across the bed until she was right in front of him. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out a feather, his tone laced with amusement. This is your last chance. I'm not telling you. Good. You're brave. With that, Luo Qing propped her foot on his lap and began gently running the feather along her sole. Since her daytime persona wouldn't remember anything her inner self experienced, Luo Qing was free to indulge in his little disciplinary tactic. The soft skin of her youthful feet made her particularly sensitive, and Layla couldn't handle the ticklish sensation. She bit her lip, writhing on the bed as laughter mixed with frustration escaped her. It wasn't long before she was gasping for air, her pale skin glistening with sweat. Her frail constitution made even this light teasing feel like an intense workout. Ready to talk now? Luo Qing asked, finally stopping after noticing how exhausted she looked. Why? Why are you asking these things? Layla lay sprawled on the bed, looking as if she'd just emerged from battle. Luo Qing hesitated briefly before deciding to come clean. I once read my fortune. A fortune? The reading said I'd spend my life with a girl who has a cryovision. And? Layla asked, genuinely curious now. She had heard about Liyue's fortune-telling practices similar to astrology, but with its own unique mystique. The better the fortune-teller, the more accurate their predictions. It didn't specify anything else. Just that she'd have a cryovision. So, I decided to get to know every girl with one. In other words. Luo Qing leaned in, his smile playful as he whispered. I have a good feeling about you too, so I wanted to get closer. Layla fell silent. It wasn't just the absurdity of his reasoning. It was the fact that he had infiltrated her room under the guise of a matra, tied her up, and tickled her all because of this nonsense. You think that after everything you've done, there's a chance between us? She asked coldly. I know. Luo Qing chuckled, lightly brushing her foot with his finger as he added. But you said it yourself. She'll never know what happened between us. Late night, Luo Qing's residence in Sumeru. Since Luo Qing was considered a collaborator, he and his team were provided lodging by the academia. The house was situated near the Grand Bazaar, right in the bustling heart of the city. He shared the residence with Makoto and Rosalind, while Natalia and the others lived in the surrounding area, forming a protective perimeter. Despite Luo Qing instructing Rosalind to return earlier in the day, it was now deep into the night, and she still hadn't come back. Still not back. Where could he have gone? Makoto sat in the living room, dressed in a lavender nightgown. Leaning against the armrest of the couch, she rested her head on her hand, staring at the candlelight on the table with a slightly displeased expression. Hey, Rosalind, do you know where he went tonight? The master told me not to say. Rosalind, seated on the other end of the couch in a deep red silk nightdress, quietly flipped through a book in the candle's glow. Humph. I bet he's off playing around with some little girl again. Let me guess. Makoto rubbed her temples, then turned to Rosalind. Her name is Layla, right? Her ability to see glimpses of the future in Inajima often revealed fleeting details, and she recalled a girl from Sumeru named Layla in one such vision. At the mention of Layla, Rosalina's expression subtly shifted, but she remained silent, continuing to read. I saw that look, Rosalind. It is her, isn't it? Makoto's sharp eye caught the change in Rosalina's demeanor, confirming her suspicion. That scoundrel. He really doesn't let anyone go, does he? As she muttered her complaint, the sound of a key turning in the door interrupted her. The door opened, and Luo Qing stepped inside, finding both Makoto and Rosalind sitting in their nightwear. You still know how to come back. Makoto huffed, her displeasure evident. Chapter 191, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 191:30 PS. Well, look at you. So dedicated, you've earned a little extra treat. Party popper. Luo Qing was baffled. He hadn't even done anything to Makoto, hadn't kissed her, hadn't touched her, yet here she was, interrogating him like a resentful wife about what he had done with Layla. What could he possibly have done? It was only their first meeting. At most, he had touched her feet. After explaining for what felt like forever, Luo Qing finally extricated himself and retreated to his room. All he wanted was a good night's sleep before heading to the sanctuary of Surasthana the next day to see if he could communicate with Nahida. As soon as he lay down, drowsiness swept over him. Closing his eyes, he drifted off to sleep. But whether he was entering a dream or waking from one, he couldn't tell. The sound of cicadas filled Luo Qing's ears, breaking his sleep. Feeling the sunlight streaming through the window, he had no choice but to get up. Does Sumeru even have cicadas? Rubbing his eyes, he sat up in bed. He was about to ask Rosalind what time it was when he noticed something shocking. The room had completely changed. It was no longer the wood-scented, domed structure of Sumeru, but a modern rectangular bedroom. What the? Luo Qing felt a wave of dizziness as fragmented, illogical memories flitted through his mind. It was disorienting, yet felt inexplicably natural. Wasn't I in Sumeru City? How did I end up back here? His gaze landed on the computer desk in the corner. The RGB-lit PC case cast a colorful glow, and 3 monitors displayed a familiar scene. The bottom right corner of the screen showed the date and time. This is, that day. The fragmented memories pieced themselves together, and Luo Qing remembered, this was the day he transmigrated to Teyvat. He had been an orphan, growing up in an orphanage until he struck out on his own at 16. Eventually, he became a small-time streamer. Though his earnings were modest, they were enough to cover his expenses and even occasionally splurge on a game pack or two. Did I come back? Luo Qing frowned, running his fingers over the wooden surface of the desk. He tapped the keyboard experimentally, and everything felt real. This can't be happening. He had just started establishing himself in Teyvat. The harem wasn't even halfway complete, and he hadn't even reached first base with anyone. How could he suddenly return now? So, it was just a dream. Murmuring to himself, Luo Qing put on a casual summer outfit and checked the time. At 9:01 a.m., he left his apartment, following a route etched in his memory. Descending the stairs, he exited his residential complex, turned left, and walked until he reached a crosswalk. Across the street was a familiar breakfast shop, a place he always visited after pulling all-nighters before heading home to crash. Except that fateful day, something had gone terribly wrong. As he waited, Luo Qing glanced to the right and saw a truck behaving erratically, speeding toward the crosswalk without slowing down despite the pedestrians. 3, 2, 1. He mentally counted, imagining where he would have been if he had stepped onto the crosswalk. Right on cue, the truck roared through the intersection, narrowly missing the pedestrians before slamming into a roadside tree. This is... Luo Qing fell silent. That day, he had been hit by the truck and reduced to nothing more than a smear on the pavement. Sigh. Serves me right for checking my phone while crossing the street. Am I really back? A sense of loss gripped his chest. If he had known this would happen, he would have prioritized making some moves back in Teyvat. What a waste. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, snapping him out of his thoughts. Shaking his head, Luo Qing started toward the breakfast shop. But just as he stepped forward, a petite figure caught his eye on the opposite side of the street. A girl with snow-white hair tied in a ponytail, wearing a dress adorned with green accents, stood barefoot, curiously peeking into a storefront. That's... When trying to distinguish between a dream and reality, people often look for something illogical. And there it was, none other than the little Archon, Nahida, wandering curiously across the street. Swallowing hard, Luo Qing ran across the crosswalk. Meanwhile, Nahida had squeezed through the crowd gathered around the crash site, her curiosity piqued by the truck accident. This dream wasn't hers, and to the dreamer, she was invisible to everyone except the creator of the dream. This place. She murmured softly, staring at the truck. Imprisoned in the sanctuary of Surasthana, she occasionally wandered into the dreams of Sumeru's citizens through the Akasha. It was her way of exploring the world, learning, and satisfying her curiosity, all in the hopes of becoming a better god. But since mastering this ability, this was the first time she had entered a dream so vivid, so lifelike. Every detail was entirely unfamiliar to her. This place. It wasn't Teyvat. Just as she was about to wander elsewhere, a voice spoke behind her. Peeking into someone else's dream without permission is quite rude, don't you think, little Archon? Nahida turned to see Luo Qing standing before her, holding a bag of breakfast. Once someone recognized the dream as a dream, it became a lucid dream. And in a lucid dream, the dreamer was effectively a god. You can see me? Nahida was startled. Most people struggled to recognize whether they were dreaming. With the Akasha, Sumer's citizens rarely even remembered their dreams. Yet this man not only noticed her presence but maintained control over the dream after realizing he was in one. It spoke of a mental fortitude far beyond ordinary. Sorry. I just found your dream intriguing and wanted to explore. Nahida looked away, embarrassed. She didn't know who Luo Qing was. She had simply stumbled upon this fascinating dream and decided to step inside, only to be caught red-handed by its creator. No need to apologize. Luo Qing walked over and handed her the bag of breakfast he'd just bought. Inside was a fresh serving of soup dumplings, a crispy fried dough stick, and a cup of warm soy milk, his favorite breakfast combo. I heard dream food doesn't have taste. Why not give it a try, little Archon? Nahida hesitated before taking a dumpling from the bag with her small hands. She took a careful bite, her expression softening. The taste is a bit strange, but it's delicious. Chive and pork. It's supposed to be tasty. Luo Qing popped one into his own mouth, savoring the flavor. To his surprise, it tasted exactly like the real thing. Food with flavor. This dream feels too real. Doubt flickered in his mind. He had never experienced a dream so vivid before. So. Luo Qing glanced at Nahida, who was now twirling her hair with her fingers. Little Archon, care to explain why you decided to sneak into my dream? Chapter 192, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 192:40 PS. Well, look at you. So dedicated, you've earned a little extra treat. Party popper. Nahida lowered her head, a bit ashamed. This was the first time she had been caught spying on someone's dream, and being confronted by the dreamer left her feeling flustered and at a loss for words. All right, I'm just teasing you. Luo Qing chuckled and moved closer to Nahida, resisting the urge to ruffle her hair. Instead, he extended his hand with a friendly smile. I'm honored to have you visit my dream, little Archon. My name is Luo Qing. Luo Qing. Nahida repeated his name softly, her gaze shifting to the outstretched hand. After a brief hesitation, she reached out with her small hand and shook his. Hello, Luo Qing. I'm Nahida. Feeling the soft, warm touch of her tiny hand, Luo Qing couldn't help but smile. The realism of this dream had its perks. Every sensation felt vivid and lifelike. If even the small details feel so real, does that mean other things might be just as? Luo Qing, you're not from Teyvat, are you? Nahida's voice broke his train of thought. She glanced around at their surroundings, her tone quiet and inquisitive. The bustling streets, mechanical vehicles, and vibrant advertisements, all of it was unlike anything that could exist in Teyvat. Even the handheld devices carried by passers-by were a mystery to her. Luo Qing's dream world was as fascinating as it was alien. Little Archon, you're as sharp as they say. Luo Qing chuckled. But this is my little secret. Can I count on you to keep it, Nahida? As the incarnation and steward of the world tree, Nahida's divine authority was unparalleled, even if her combat prowess lagged behind the other archons. Luo Qing had long anticipated that she might discover his true origins someday. However, the manner in which she did so had caught him by surprise. All right. If this is the price for intruding on your dream, I'm willing to accept it, Nahida said with a gentle nod, her voice soft and sincere. It's settled, then, Luo Qing replied casually before taking another look at the surroundings. Even now, the dream's uncanny realism astonished him. This is the first time I've experienced such a lifelike dream. Any idea why it's like this, little Archon? Nahida hesitated. I'm not sure. I simply stumbled upon the bubble of your dream and decided to enter. I see. Luo Qing pondered for a moment before recalling something. Last night, he had deliberately kept his Akasha terminal on while sleeping, hoping it might attract Nahida's attention. Could it be that this hyper-realistic dream was a result of the Akasha terminal enhancing his brain's computational power? Whatever. Luo Qing shook his head. If this dream offered him a chance to relieve the real world, he wasn't going to overanalyze it, especially not when Nahida was here to keep him company. It would be a shame to waste such an opportunity. You seem curious about this world, little Archon, Luo Qing said, smiling as he walked beside her. How about I give you a tour? Anything you want to know, just ask, and I'll explain it to you. For some reason, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was enticing an innocent young girl into mischief. Knowledge from another world. Nahida lowered her head in thought. This shouldn't be forbidden knowledge, right? If it wasn't forbidden knowledge, then absorbing a little bit should be fine, right? After a moment of hesitation, she glanced again at the lively street around her. Unable to suppress her curiosity, she looked up at Luo Qing. All right. I'll leave it to you, Luo Qing. Great. Luo Qing stepped aside to let Nahida walk beside him. With a slight nod, she followed as they ventured down the street together. The neighborhood where Luo Qing's apartment was located wasn't part of the city center, so the streets were lined mostly with old shops, with nothing particularly remarkable in sight. There were no giant advertisements from MiHoYo, no slogans like "Meet your fated encounter, enjoy the taste of another world." As they strolled, Luo Qing explained various curiosities to Nahida. From self-service adult stores to scams involving instant riches plastered on utility poles, and the truth behind clearance sales that didn't actually involve anyone jumping off buildings, he covered it all. By the time they finished exploring the street, Nahida was visibly overwhelmed, though some of the terminology still baffled her. It didn't stop her from being thoroughly amazed, and she even expressed a desire to revisit Luo Qing's dream in the future. Dreams always pass quickly. Just as Luo Qing was about to take Nahida to the bustling city center to test the dream's boundaries, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. Standing with her hands clasped behind her back, she looked up at him. Thank you for showing me your dream, Luo Qing. What's wrong? Luo Qing asked, puzzled. They hadn't even been exploring for half an hour. Time moves faster in dreams than in reality, Nahida said softly. Luo Qing, it's time for you to wake up. And it's time for me to return. Return. Nahida nodded, her tone gentle. Until next time, Luo Qing. With that, her figure dissolved into a faint green light, vanishing from his dream. Wait. Luo Qing instinctively reached out to stop her, but his hand grasped nothing but air. The next moment, he woke up abruptly, sitting upright in his bed. You okay? Did you have a nightmare? Makoto's voice came from beside him. Turning his head, he saw her sitting at the edge of the bed, still dressed in her loose lavender nightgown from the night before. The sight of her snow-white skin and ample curves nearly made him choke. No, it's nothing, Luo Qing said, shaking his head and glancing toward the window. The sun was already high in the sky, its rays streaming through the glass to illuminate his room. If it's nothing, don't scare me like that. Makoto gave him a look of mild annoyance. Hurry up and get downstairs for breakfast. It's getting cold. She tossed his clothes at him before turning and leaving the room. For some reason, watching Makoto's retreating figure gave Luo Qing the odd feeling of being a husband in a domestic scene. What exactly had happened between the two of them to lead to this dynamic? Scratching his head, he thought back to his dream from last night before getting dressed and heading downstairs. At the dining table in the corner of the living room, a Mondstadt-style breakfast awaited him. Makoto and Rosalind each occupied a corner of the couch, one knitting a sweater, the other engrossed in a book. As soon as Luo Qing appeared, Rosalind stood up and respectfully asked, Master, breakfast is ready. Shall I reheat it for you? No need. Luo Qing waved her off, sitting at the table alone. While eating, his mind lingered on the dream. Even after waking, he couldn't help but marvel at how vivid it had been. The dream had felt so real that when he threw a punch at an NPC, not only did he feel the feedback, but the NPC had even pretended to suffer a concussion, presumably to extort him. After finishing his meal, Luo Qing was about to head out when there was a knock at the door. Makoto glanced at him, her voice low. Make sure you're back early tonight. With that, she and Rosalind ascended the stairs, leaving Luo Qing alone. Chapter 193, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 193 ps. Well, look at you. So dedicated, you've earned a little extra treat. Party popper. Who could it be this early in the morning? Still mulling over the strange sense of authority Jin exuded, Luo Qing shuffled to the door and opened it. Mr. Luo Qing, the Grand Sage requests your presence at the sanctuary of Surasthana, said Setaret, the ever-reliable aide to Azar. Her tone was as flat as ever. Luo Qing's brows furrowed in confusion. Could Azar have found out about his interaction with Nahida last night? Testing the waters, he asked, what does Azar want with me? It's the routine communication day with the little Archon. The Grand Sage believes observing it might help you with your duties. Routine communication day. Luo Qing blinked, momentarily stunned. What in Teyvat was a communication day? All right, give me a moment to change. With that, he shut the door in Setaret's face with a decisive click. Moments later, he reappeared, dressed in his matra uniform. Say what you will, this outfit carried a certain weight in Sumura city. People usually steered clear just at the sight of him. Following Setaret, Luo Qing once again arrived at the device imprisoning Nahida in the sanctuary of Surasthana. However, compared to last time, there were now additional strange instruments surrounding the area. I thought this was a communication day. Luo Qing glanced at the devices with a skeptical smile. Are you planning to communicate with her or experiment on her? Humph. Azar snorted disdainfully and condescended to explain. Everything we need to say has already been encapsulated in these canned knowledge capsules. With the help of the transmission device, we simply insert them into her consciousness via the Akasha. Canned knowledge. Luo Qing followed Azar's gesture and saw rows of green capsules neatly arranged on a storage rack. What's inside them? Just messages we wish to convey to her, Azar replied curtly before signaling to a nearby researcher. The transmission began, and one by one, the green capsules turned into streams of light, traveling through the device's tubes and entering Nahida's containment field. From behind the pale green barrier, Luo Qing could faintly make out Nahida's figure. Her expression turned pained, and her small body curled even tighter. It was clear that these so-called messages were far from kind words. So, if this device can transmit canned knowledge, doesn't that mean it could also be used to communicate directly with her? Luo Qing pointed at the contraption, his tone casual. The setup resembled a head-mounted neural interface so much that he couldn't help but make the connection. Humph. Azar's lips curled into a sneer. You're smarter than I expected. Yes, this device could facilitate direct communication, but we don't need that. She is unworthy of being our guide. Come on, she's still your god. No need to be so harsh, Luo Qing quipped, shaking his head. He stepped closer to the transmission device and gestured to the helmet-like structure. Mind if I borrow this? What do you need it for? Azar asked suspiciously. Well, didn't you bring me here to influence her mind? Luo Qing replied, pointing at Nahida, who was still curled up inside her containment. If I don't talk to her, how can I manipulate her? Azar fell silent for a moment. While Nahida was young and inexperienced, her mental fortitude was still that of a god. This was the real reason Azar avoided direct interaction. There was a significant risk of mental backlash through the device. Yet, Luo Qing didn't seem concerned in the slightest. Are you having second thoughts? Humph. A mortal's mind isn't equipped to handle divine mental strength. If you insist on trying, why should I stop you? Azar sneered and signaled the researcher to set up the device for Luo Qing. Don't say I didn't warn you. If she retaliates, you might end up a drooling idiot. In Azar's eyes, Luo Qing was just another lunatic from the Fatui, much like Dottery. While Azar doubted Luo Qing could cause any real harm to their plans, he didn't mind letting him attempt the impossible. After all, decades of conditioning wouldn't be unraveled by a few words. Ignoring Azar's smug disdain, Luo Qing donned the neural interface. The researcher nodded at him, then activated the device. Humph, these Fatui really are insane, Azar muttered before turning to leave the chamber. You lot, record his condition once he's done, he instructed the staff. Without the authority to monitor Nahida's activities within the Akasha, Azar decided to leave Luo Qing's potential mental collapse to be logged for later analysis. As soon as the device started, Luo Qing's vision went dark. When the darkness lifted, he found himself in a vast void. Nahida sat in the center, her small frame curled up as if she were shielding herself from the oppressive gloom. Nahida! Luo Qing called softly. There was no response. Nahida! Still, she didn't stir. Her eyes remained closed, her breathing shallow and steady. Is she asleep? Luo Qing mused, his thoughts swirling. After a moment's pause, he tried again. Nohida, sweetie. My dear wife. My precious daughter. Despite his various attempts, Nohida stayed motionless, curled up like a sleeping white kitten. Nothing's working. Luo Qing sighed, realizing he'd have to take matters into his own hands. Focusing his intent, he stepped closer to her, crouched down, and gently cupped her face with his hands. Her soft, round cheeks felt warm against his palms as he slowly lifted her face. As though sensing the touch, Nohida's body relaxed slightly, and she opened her eyes, her emerald gaze filled with a mix of confusion and recognition. You are. Her voice was soft, hesitant. Then, as her memories pieced themselves together, her expression shifted. Luo Qing. What are you doing here? I came to check on you. You disappeared so suddenly last night, Luo Qing said with a chuckle, his hands instinctively ruffling her hair. The classic head pat, always reliable, never overrated. Nohida lowered her head, a trace of guilt in her expression. I'm sorry, Luo Qing. Don't apologize. How about you make it up to me by taking a walk with me around Sumeru City? Luo Qing's tone was light, though deep down, he harbored a faint hope. If he could awaken Nohida's full potential now, he might become the foremost supporter of the Little Archon's rise. The thought alone conjured up countless scenarios in which he could milk frustration points from academia scholars. I'm sorry, Luo Qing. Nohida whispered, her voice tinged with sorrow. Her expression grew solemn, as if weighed down by immense pain. The current me. I'm still too immature. I'm not ready to face the people of Sumeru. When I grow up, when I become a proper god, then we can walk through Sumeru City together. Okay. Chapter 194, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 194-100 PS. Well, look at you. So dedicated, you've earned a little extra treat. Party popper. Godhood isn't something you can pass or fail at, Luo Qing said with a gentle smile. Taking advantage of Nohida's momentary daze, he gave her another head pat. You're a god. It's your inherent nature. Why should you measure yourself by the standards set by others? I understand. Nohida lowered her head, her voice tinged with melancholy. But the previous god entrusted me with the responsibility of guiding Sumeru's people. I haven't been able to meet their expectations. It's my failure as a god. But... Luo Qing tried to interject, but Nohida cut him off. I'll keep learning through dreams here, she said, her tone determined. When the day comes that I can truly fulfill my duties as a god, then, Luo Qing, I'll take you on a walk through Sumeru City. Will that be all right? Luo Qing fell silent. The constant emotional manipulation by the academia's leadership was clearly taking its toll. They'd been gaslighting Nohida so thoroughly she didn't even realize how deeply she'd been pitted against herself. Just as he was considering a different approach, the scene around him began to change. The darkness shattered, and Luo Qing found himself back in the sanctuary of Surasthana. Why did it disconnect? Annoyed, he turned to the researcher nearby. The transmission device overloaded, the researcher explained, gesturing at the apparatus. The once vivid green transmission tubes had turned a deep red. Overloaded. Luo Qing frowned. Godly consciousness is immensely powerful. The Little Archon experienced a strong emotional fluctuation just now, and the transmission device couldn't handle the surge. That's why it overloaded, the researcher explained while beginning to dismantle the equipment. Can't we use it again today? Luo Qing's interest was piqued. If Nohida's emotional reaction indicated progress, this was the perfect time to strike while the iron was hot. It's not usable anymore. The researcher shook his head. After being overloaded by divine mental energy, this device is probably fried. He glanced at Luo Qing with a puzzled expression. A mortal would typically suffer severe backlash from exposure to a god's emotional surge through the Akasha, losing their sanity, rolling their eyes back, or even wetting themselves. Yet Luo Qing seemed perfectly fine. What are you staring at me for? Luo Qing asked, noticing the odd look. And nothing. The researcher quickly shook his head and continued packing up. We conduct these communication sessions twice a month. We'll inform you about the next one. For now, you may leave. Luo Qing scrutinized the researcher for a moment. They didn't seem to be hiding anything. Reluctantly, he turned to look at Nohida, still asleep within her containment device, then shook his head and left the sanctuary. The midday sun blazed overhead as Luo Qing stepped outside. Remembering Makoto's request to come home early for lunch, he decided to head back. But as he walked through the plaza near the Academia, he spotted someone familiar: Layla. On the other side of the square, Layla also noticed Luo Qing. Panicking, she glanced around desperately for a place to hide. However, the open plaza offered no cover, leaving her frozen in indecision. Her anxious movements didn't escape Luo Qing's sharp eyes. She wasn't this skittish last time we met. What happened? Quickening his pace, Luo Qing intercepted her just as she tried to dart toward the Academia. Well, if it isn't Miss Layla. What a coincidence. Are you visiting the Academia too? Did you sleep well last night? Hello, Mr. Luo Qing. Layla stammered, her gaze flitting everywhere but at him, her expression uneasy. Am I that scary today, Miss Layla? Luo Qing asked, genuinely puzzled. The previous night, he'd spent quite some time tickling her inner personality's solace. Despite the effort it had taken to get her inner self to talk, Layla's dominant personality shouldn't have remembered anything. Had her inner self lied to him? And no. Layla quickly shook her head but still hesitated, glancing at Luo Qing with a mix of guilt and nervousness. What's wrong, Miss Layla? Are you in trouble? Don't hesitate to tell me. As a Matra officer, it's my duty to help. Luo Qing declared, grabbing her hand enthusiastically. After a long moment of hesitation, Layla finally seemed to make up her mind. Mr. Luo Qing, could you let go of my hand first? Oh, right. My bad, I got a little carried away, Luo Qing said, feigning embarrassment as he let go. Though, in truth, he wouldn't have minded holding her hand a bit longer. Layla rubbed her hand nervously before pulling a small piece of paper from her pouch. Someone left this on my desk last night. A note. Luo Qing took the paper and unfolded it, reading the large characters scrawled across it. Beware of Luo Qing. Ding. +1 frustration value from Luo Qing. Seriously? Hadn't Layla's inner self said she wouldn't let the dominant personality know about her existence? And now she was leaving notes? As if to drive the point home, a smaller line of text beneath the bold warning read. If you don't believe me, check your solace. Okay, Luo Qing had to admit, maybe he'd gone a little overboard last night. It wasn't his fault Layla's inner self had such ticklish feet. Layla's voice trembled, sounding both hesitant and aggrieved. When I woke up this morning, my solace were so red. The note had terrified her at first. Fearing Luo Qing might have done something inappropriate, she had even checked her body. But aside from the redness on her feet, there were no other suspicious marks. Luo Qing froze, unsure how to respond. In hindsight, he should have applied some ointment or at least pretended to heal her. Taking a deep breath, Luo Qing straightened his expression and placed his hands firmly on Layla's shoulders. His tone was serious and sincere as their eyes met. Miss Layla, this is a traditional Liyue foot massage technique. It's great for relieving tension and improving sleep. Last night, I noticed you were utterly exhausted, so I decided to help you relax while you rested. Miss Layla, you're not mad at me, are you? Chapter 195, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 195-200 PS. Well, look at you. So dedicated, you've earned a little extra treat. Party popper. Layla was young, naive, and deeply engrossed in her academic pursuits. How could she possibly compete against a sly veteran like Luo Qing, who'd spent years navigating the treacherous politics of Snezhnia? Under the relentless assault of Luo Qing's earnest gaze and honeyed words, she quickly caved. Really, it was just a foot massage. Absolutely. I swear on the Geo Archon's name I didn't touch anything else. Staring into Luo Qing's sincere, almost dazzling eyes, Layla felt a little lost. There were no signs that her body had been touched elsewhere, and Luo Qing's explanation sounded plausible. But, he had touched her feet. And then there was this mysterious note. What about this paper, then? That's obviously someone trying to sow discord. Luo Qing said, his expression righteous. Maybe it's the mysterious person you mentioned, the one who's been interfering with your life. They probably think I'll expose them and want to scare you into staying away from me. Layla began to think. Luo Qing's theory wasn't entirely without merit. After all, he was a Matra officer and had the badge and the custom Akasha terminal to prove it. Then I... Before she could finish her sentence, Luo Qing cut her off. Miss Layla, you look like you're still tired. How about you head back home and take another nap? But... No buts. Napping is a key part of academic productivity. Luo Qing declared confidently. Before Layla could react, Luo Qing had already taken her by the hand, gently but firmly steering her back toward her house. This time, I'll stay hidden and keep watch. If that mysterious person thinks I've left, they might show themselves again. Ah! Not long after, Layla found herself back at home, half-willingly led by Luo Qing. Mr. Luo Qing, I'll just rest my head on the desk for a bit, okay? Layla's voice was soft, her demeanor uncomfortable with how forward Luo Qing had been. No problem at all. You sleep, I've got everything under control. Thumping his chest with his fist, Luo Qing grinned warmly, radiating enthusiasm. With a slight nod, Layla leaned forward, resting her head on her desk. Within seconds, she was fast asleep. And just a few seconds after that, her head snapped back up again. Why'd she fall asleep so early today? The inner Layla stared at the clock on the desk, puzzled. Turning her head, she caught sight of Luo Qing sitting casually on her bed. Good afternoon, Luo Qing said, narrowing his eyes in mock amusement. I told her to get some rest? And yet, here I am, still here. You didn't want her to know about your existence, right? You said it'd cause her emotional distress to learn about her inner persona. So why, pray tell, did you leave that little note for her? Luo Qing dangled the incriminating note between his fingers. Humph. Better she freak out than end up in your hands. Inner Layla muttered sulkily. She knew her dominant persona all too well, a pure, innocent soul who poured her entire being into academics, completely clueless about emotions or relationships. There was no way she'd let that side of her fall for a scoundrel like Luo Qing. What's that supposed to mean, in my hands? Luo Qing asked, clearly offended. Do I look like a bad guy to you? Do you even need to ask? Inner Layla huffed, her gaze dropping to the bracelet on Luo Qing's wrist. That bracelet you're wearing, let me guess. A girl gave it to you, right? Luo Qing froze. How did she nail that on the first try? Well, she wasn't entirely wrong. What's wrong? Got nothing to say now. Seeing Luo Qing momentarily speechless, Layla smirked triumphantly. You're right. Luo Qing admitted with a slight nod. But she doesn't know, so it's not like it'll stop me from deepening my bond with her, right? Ding. +1 frustration value from Layla. You're such a scumbag, Layla said flatly, utterly baffled by Luo Qing's audacity. Who could be this shameless and still hold their head high? And you're not worried I'll tell her? Go ahead. Luo Qing shrugged. I have nothing to hide. Layla fell silent. She had never encountered anyone this brazen in her life. Was he really a Matra officer? After bickering with inner Layla for a while, Luo Qing decided to leave. Her hostility was too intense, and given that both personas shared the same body, he couldn't exactly go all out against her inner self. After trading a few more jabs, Luo Qing walked back to his home, hoping to catch lunch. Sure enough, his timing was impeccable. As he stepped into the dining room, he found Makoto and Rosalind already seated at the table, enjoying a spread of inajimon dishes. Look who finally decided to come home, Makoto said, glancing at him with a teasing smile. Well, I didn't have much going on, Luo Qing replied as he slid into his seat. But before he could pick up his chopsticks, Makoto leaned closer and sniffed him. You smell like another woman. Are you part bloodhound or something? Humph. None of your business. Makoto pouted, but her expression betrayed a playful smirk. Let me guess, it's that Layla girl again, isn't it? Luo Qing's silence spoke volumes. How were all these girls so good at guessing? Why the long face? Makoto teased, poking his shoulder. I'm not saying I'll stop you. Wait, really? Luo Qing blinked in surprise. Makoto was this chill about the idea of him building a harem? But wait a second. We haven't even done anything together. Why does she act like she's the main wife here? Of course. Makoto crossed her arms and leaned back smugly. I know everything about you. There's no point in trying to stop you. Luo Qing opened his mouth to explain himself but was quickly cut off. Do you have plans this afternoon? Makoto asked, poking his forehead. No, why? Luo Qing asked, confused. Makoto suddenly pulled a flyer from her sleeve, a sly grin on her face. There's a performance at the Grand Bazaar this evening. Come with me. Hey. Luo Qing took the flyer from her. It was an advertisement for a show at Zubair Theatre, scheduled for sunset today. I can't just sit around at home like some caged bird, can I? Makoto said, standing up and leaning close to him. I've let you run around all this time. Don't you think it's about time you took me out for once? Luo Qing sighed. There was no denying it now. Makoto fully saw herself as his primary wife. What kind of future had she foreseen to make her act this way? But you. Relax. Makoto grinned. I'll wear that imitation mask you gave to Rosalind. No one will recognize me. Fine. Luo Qing sighed, resigned. Great. Then it's settled. Low cough, cough. Makoto cut herself off, quickly covering her mouth. I'll go upstairs to change. Chapter 196, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 196 400 PS. Well, look at you. So dedicated, you've earned a little extra treat. Party popper. At home, he spent a leisurely afternoon idling away time. Eventually, evening arrived. Makoto changed into a light purple, airy kimono. Taking advantage of the twilight, she walked alongside Luo Qing through the streets of Sumeru, heading toward the Grand Bazaar. This time, it was just the two of them going to watch the performance. Rosalind had been left behind at home. With the use of a simulated mask, Makoto's appearance now bore a resemblance to her previous one, close enough to avoid confusion, but different enough not to raise questions. Her waist-length dark purple hair and her delicate, charming face gave her an air of refined beauty. Coupled with her Inajima-style attire, her presence drew quite a few glances along the way. Hey, let me ask you something. They had just walked a short distance when Makoto turned her head slightly, glancing at Luo Qing. Her voice was soft. When you flirt with girls, do you always walk like this? What? Luo Qing was puzzled. He didn't quite catch her meaning. Walking is just walking, right? Did she expect him to do something outrageous while walking? TCH, playing dumb, are we? Makoto whispered, leaning closer as she pointed at his arm with her lips. Let go of me. Hey. Luo Qing blinked, still a bit dazed, but followed her words and let his arm drop. The next moment, Makoto slipped her right arm through the crook of his, pressing her body lightly against his side and linking arms with him. The soft sensation on his arm, paired with the faint scent of cherry blossoms emanating from her, left Luo Qing baffled. In his memory, ever since he'd revived Makoto, he hadn't gone out of his way to woo her. In fact, he hadn't even tried flirting with her. So why was she suddenly holding on to him like this? You. What about me? Makoto tilted her lips into a faint smile, her tone playful and gentle. What? Are you afraid the girl you're trying to charm might see us like this? I'm not. Don't make stuff up. Then it's fine, isn't it? Makoto let out a soft hum of amusement, continuing to walk arm in arm with him toward the Grand Bazaar. With such a beautiful, elegant woman clinging to him, their presence drew even more attention as they walked. The Sumeru passers-by couldn't wrap their heads around it. How could such a stunning and graceful woman already have a partner? And that guy, what did he have going for him besides being just a little good-looking? On the other hand, Luo Qing was still dumbfounded. In all his time since arriving in this world, this was the first time he'd met a girl who was so openly forward with him. What exactly did you see? He asked in a low voice. Why are you asking this again? Makoto tilted her head up slightly, gazing at him as she pressed closer. Her voice carried a teasing hum. Can't it be that I've simply taken a liking to you? Don't do this, I'm scared, Luo Qing muttered weakly. Having grown up in Snezhnia, he didn't believe in free lunches. Any sudden benefit was often accompanied by traps or schemes. Even though he had brought Makoto back to life, her actions now went far beyond anything he had anticipated. This woman was just too over the top, more so than Teresa, the reigning queen of smooth talk. Tisk, look at you, all nervous. Makoto poked his shoulder, her eyes surprisingly filled with affection. Do you really think I'd harm you? Well, you could at least give me a reason. fine. Seeing the confusion on his face, Makoto seemed to contemplate for a moment. As she led him along, she began to explain in a gentle voice. You're aware of my consciousness realm, right? I am, but what does that have to do with the future you mentioned? It's simple, Makoto replied with ease. It embodies my understanding and insight into the concept of eternity. Eternity isn't about unchanging stasis, like what EI believes. It originates from Teyvat's space-time yet transcends it. The past and future are one, and what binds them together is eternity. My consciousness realm reflects that. It exists outside of Teyvat's time and space, an unrestricted domain. But how does that answer my question? Luo Qing asked hesitantly. When Baal-sama is speaking, no interruptions. Makoto huffed softly and pinched his wrist before continuing. Since it's independent of time and space, it means that from the moment I created it, every version of me from any point in time can enter it. You mean, future you can also enter it? Luo Qing struggled to grasp the concept. If that were true, wouldn't there be multiple versions of Makoto in the consciousness realm simultaneously? Yes and no. Makoto shook her head, raising her linked hands and extending her index finger. Look, imagine these two fingers, the one on my left hand represents the past, and the one on my right represents the future. When they both enter the consciousness realm snap they merge into one finger again. There will only ever be one version of me in the realm. But when future me and past me both enter, my consciousness layers together, and I gain the memories of both the past and future. The past me understands what will happen in the future, and the future me remembers the past even more vividly. That's how I'm able to see the future. Luo Qing fell silent. He understood what she meant, and it left him astonished. So rather than seeing it, it's more like you experienced it yourself, gaining the memories. Smart boy, Makoto said as she reached out to pinch his nose lightly, her eyes filled with unmistakable tenderness. But I still don't quite get it. Luo Qing thought for a moment and asked, didn't you say you saw multiple timelines of the future? Does that mean you experienced all of them? Not exactly. Makoto shook her head and continued. The future is uncertain yet singular. The reason I can see many futures is that they are all possibilities. After certain key events occur, some futures cease to exist. When that happens, they vanish from my mind as though they were never there to begin with. So. Luo Qing pondered for a moment. After I revived you, the only futures you could see were the ones where I existed. Correct. Ah, I see. Luo Qing sighed. Now it all made sense why Makoto was so unusually attached to him. It turned out that his future self had already put in the effort for him. All he had to do now was roll up his sleeves and reap the rewards. This really was too cool. It seems like we will go through a lot together in the future. Luo Qing looked to the sky. If you want to know, you could ask me nicely. Maybe I'd give you a little hint, Makoto teased. Of course, I can't tell you too much. Who knows? It might affect the future. If we accidentally ended up with a bad ending, that'd be awful. A bad ending? Luo Qing was taken aback. How could words like these come out of Makoto's mouth? Who's the one actually from another world here her army? So, is there anything you want to ask me? Well. Luo Qing thought for a while before nodding. There's one thing I'm really curious about. Go ahead. How many people are in my harem, exactly? Chapter 197, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 197. In the end, Makoto still didn't tell Luo Qing the exact number. All she said was that it was a lot, and then confidently patted him on the shoulder, assuring him that as long as she was around, there would never be chaos in his harem. He was free to flirt however he pleased. Luo Qing understood her words, but he was equally stunned. Did that mean she was the main wife? It all made sense now. Before the last rays of twilight faded, the two of them entered the Grand Bazaar, still holding hands. Compared to the stern and solemn atmosphere of the Academia, the people of the Grand Bazaar were far more enthusiastic and full of life. Merchants on either side of the streets shouted energetically, while the faces of passing travelers were filled with carefree joy. Walking hand in hand with Makoto along the bustling streets gave off the vibe of a long-married couple going grocery shopping after work. Before long, they arrived at the very heart of the Grand Bazaar. This was the stage of the Zubair Theatre. The performers from Zubair Theatre held their shows here every day, and tickets weren't even required. Luo Qing had no idea how this theatre managed to sustain itself financially. It's not like they could be running a side hustle in merchandise sales, could they? Today's performance was said to feature Nilo, the theater's star dancer. As one of the most stunning beauties in all of Sumeru, Nilo was incredibly popular in the Grand Bazaar. The performance hadn't even officially started, yet the seats around the stage were already packed, leaving no room to move. Luo Qing and Makoto had arrived early enough to snag seats in the front row. Suddenly, the stage lights dimmed. In the darkness, the faint silhouette of a girl stepped quickly to the center of the stage. The next moment, the radiant glow of a hydrovision lit up. Water elements gathered around the girl, forming lotuses that floated gracefully into the air. The lights came back on, revealing a beautiful girl with long crimson hair standing center stage. Her mere presence ignited cheers from the crowd. OMG, Nilo is just too beautiful. Miss Nilo, do you need a dog at home? I come with my own leash. Nilo is the best. Thank you, everyone. Nilo smiled sweetly at the audience, then pressed a finger gently to her lips. The crowd instantly quieted down. Soft, melodious music began to play. As the rhythm flowed, Nilo's movements on stage became a breathtaking dance, her figure gracefully rising and falling with the melody. Many of the men in the audience were utterly captivated. Of course, Luo Qing wasn't one of them. After all, he'd seen countless beauties in his time. Ahem. Makoto cleared her throat, glancing sideways at him. You're here with me today. Watch your expression. I'm just appreciating the art. Luo Qing retorted. Teyvat had so many beautiful girls he may have been a bit of a flirt, but it wasn't like he had his eye on every single one of them. Though, Nilo's figure was admittedly impressive. Clearly, all that dance training had paid off. And her? Wait. Appreciating what exactly? The clothes? The person? Or the person in the clothes? Makoto huffed softly, leaning closer to whisper in his ear. Should I try wearing something like that tonight? Luo Qing turned his head. Are you serious? Humph. Makoto's lips curled into a mischievous smile. Keep dreaming. Luo Qing's brow twitched. Why did Makoto suddenly feel like such a sly fox? While the two were bickering, Nilo finished her first performance on stage and began thanking the audience. Thank you, everyone. Please take a short break, we'll have the next performer on stage soon. Before she could finish, a commotion broke out in one corner of the audience. A group of scholars dressed in academia uniforms, escorted by guards, pushed their way through the crowd, interrupting the performance. You all. Nilo frowned slightly, maintaining a polite demeanor. May I ask what brings you here? The performance is still ongoing. If it's nothing urgent. She was abruptly cut off by the leader of the group, a man with a cold expression. Fetch your manager. We're here for a routine business inspection. The man showed no remorse for interrupting the show. But the performance is still. I won't repeat myself. Bring out your manager, he said coldly. Otherwise, I'll have this venue shut down for illegal operations. You're doing this on purpose. Nilo's frustration showed. This wasn't the first time the man had caused a scene during a performance, always under the same pretense. Unfortunately, as a representative of the Academia and the Grand Bazaar's governing authority, he held power that even Mr. Zubair couldn't counter. Think whatever you want, the man sneered. Now, get your manager. His eyes scanned the audience dismissively. Though the spectators were visibly angry, they didn't dare speak up. The guards accompanying the scholars, armed with curved swords and spears, weren't the type to reason with. All they could do was watch helplessly as their beloved Nilo was harassed. Tisk, how annoying, Makoto muttered, puffing her cheeks in frustration. These people are clearly here to make trouble. She nudged Luo Qing with her elbow. They're ruining the show. Go teach them a lesson. Hey! Luo Qing was momentarily stunned. What were you about to call me just now? Slip of the tongue. Don't overthink it. Just get rid of those guys, I want to enjoy the performance. Makoto's tone turned playful, resembling a girl pouting at her boyfriend after a bad day. All right, Luo Qing said with a shrug. He was already annoyed with the troublemakers anyway. He opened the system interface in his mind, scrolling through his item cards to decide which one to use. Making them sing in public might be embarrassing, but they deserve something harsher. Muttering to himself, his gaze landed on a particular card, extreme nausea and diarrhea. Ding! You have used 3 extreme nausea and diarrhea cards. The cards, capable of briefly influencing even divine beings, were a precious resource to Luo Qing. Thus, he only used them on the 3 lead scholars causing trouble. How many times do I have to tell you? If you don't. The lead scholar suddenly froze. His brows furrowed as an unsettling sensation overwhelmed him. He clamped a hand over his mouth. Why did he feel like throwing up? And why did his stomach feel off? Oh. He couldn't hold it in. What are you people even? Nilo, still fuming, was about to confront them further when she noticed the lead scholar and his 2 companions drop to the ground. Each of them clutched their stomachs with one hand and covered their mouths with the other. Both Nilo and the audience were puzzled, wondering what on earth was happening. Blag. Splat. The next moment, the 3 scholars could no longer contain themselves. They vomited violently. And as their abdominal muscles contracted, their other muscles gave out too. The dampness spreading from their backsides left no doubt as to what had just happened. The stunned silence in the audience was broken by a cry of disbelief. Holy crap, are they seriously puking and crapping themselves on stage? Chapter 198, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 198. While everyone else was frozen in disbelief, the 3 scholars on stage didn't stop their outputs, both from their mouths and elsewhere. Before long, most of the Zhuobeir theater's stage was smeared with an unmentionable, pale yellow semi-solid substance. Why did you use that? For once, Makoto didn't know what to say. All she wanted was for Luo Qing to get rid of those scholars and stop them from ruining her show. Now, with the stage in such a state, how was the performance supposed to continue? What's the problem? Did I do something wrong? Luo Qing glanced at the 3 scholars lying limp in the mess they'd created, completely devoid of any sympathy. Weren't you the one who told me to teach them a lesson? I didn't mean for the lesson to have this much aroma. Makoto sighed, exasperated. Meanwhile, the guards on stage finally realized that if this continued, the 3 scholars might actually endanger their own lives. Enduring the stench, they hauled the scholars out of the mess and swiftly retreated from the Zhuobeir theater. They had come in like a storm and left just as quickly. Even Nilo, who was no stranger to dramatic situations on stage, stood there in stunned silence. What were these academia people even trying to accomplish? First, they made things difficult for the theater, and now they had literally made a mess. Moments later, a man hurried onto the stage from backstage. When he saw the scene before him, he froze, bewildered. This. Nilo, where did those academia people go? Mr. Zhuobeir. Nilo was at a loss for words, unsure how to explain. They came in saying the same things as before, but then, somehow, they just started vomiting and well. What? Mr. Zhuobeir glanced down at the unidentified liquid on the stage, his disbelief evident. They really went all out. After a moment of contemplation, he turned to the audience with an apologetic smile. Dear audience members, due to unforeseen circumstances, the performance will be temporarily postponed. Feel free to explore other parts of the Grand Bazaar for now. Once the stage has been cleaned, we'll resume the show. His announcement caused a stir in the crowd. However, knowing the cause of the interruption, the audience didn't blame the theater. Instead, they vented their frustration by cursing the academia for their behavior, then gradually dispersed. Well, that's the end of the show. Makoto shrugged, giving Luo Qing a slightly annoyed look. Standing up, she loosened her arm just enough to create a small gap. So, are you staying here, or are you coming with me for a walk? Luo Qing glanced at her expression. Even with just a glance, he could tell Makoto wanted him to stand up and link arms with her again. This woman. She's just too good at this. My apologies for ruining Makoto's evening. Luo Qing smiled gently, stood up, and took her arm in his, pulling her closer so their shoulders were touching. What a joke, he wasn't one to retreat in these situations. So, where to next? No need to wonder, Makoto replied, shaking her head. The mood's already ruined. Let's go home. All right then. Luo Qing didn't mind. With Makoto on his arm, he began heading toward their residence. By the way, Makoto suddenly tilted her head, as if something had just occurred to her. That red-haired girl's outfit. Should I have a couple of those made for myself? Hey! Luo Qing blinked, not quite processing her words. What's that look for? Makoto huffed, poking his nose with her finger. I'll make some when we get home. And if you come back on time every night, maybe just maybe if I'm in a good mood, I'll wear one for you. If you put it that way, there are quite a few styles I'd like to see. Is that so? Makoto let out a soft hum, leaning close to whisper in his ear. As long as you're home on time, I can try anything you want. Luo Qing felt like he couldn't handle it anymore. Makoto was just too good at teasing, it made his heart itch. But not here, not now. The Grand Bazaar was too crowded, making it inconvenient for him to take action. Suppressing his emotions, Luo Qing maintained a composed expression and continued walking home. Despite his calm demeanor, Makoto kept teasing him with her on-time conditions, her playful tone dripping with mischief. Yet Luo Qing refused to react, maintaining the stoic air of a steel-hearted man. Eventually, Makoto gave up, leaning against him as she hummed a tune from her homeland, and the two of them made their way home. By the time they reached their door, the sky had turned completely dark. Unlike the lively nighttime scenes of Liyue or Inajima, Sumeru City was much quieter after dusk. Aside from the Grand Bazaar, the streets were mostly deserted, with many shops already closed for the night. Standing at their doorstep, Luo Qing suddenly stopped in his tracks. What's wrong? Makoto looked up at him, puzzled. Why had he stopped all of a sudden? Tell me, Makoto, Luo Qing said, looking down at her with a meaningful expression. You wouldn't blame me, would you? Blame you for what? Before she could finish, Luo Qing leaned in and covered her soft, pink lips with his own. The best way to tell if someone was all talk was to test them directly. And Makoto had been dancing around his limits for a while now. He couldn't hold back any longer. Their kiss lasted a long time, Luo Qing finally letting go after a thorough exchange. Woo! Makoto's cheeks flushed as she pressed a hand to her chest, panting lightly. I wasn't ready for that. Now she understood what Luo Qing had meant earlier. Tilting her head, her cheeks puffed slightly in mock indignation. Wait, let me. Luo Qing started to speak, but Makoto suddenly cupped his face in her hands, locking eyes with him. What's wrong? Luo Qing saw his reflection in her deep violet eyes, momentarily entranced. I wasn't ready just now, Makoto said softly. So, let's do it again. She rose onto her tiptoes, closed her eyes, and initiated the kiss this time. This kiss lasted even longer. With her resolve steeled, Makoto's approach was far more assertive than before. Luo Qing could feel her intensity, their embrace growing tighter as the seconds stretched on. By the time they finally parted, Luo Qing found himself lost in Makoto's delicate, beautiful face. He couldn't help but pull her closer into his arms, while Makoto rested her head against his chest. They stood there, holding each other for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Makoto spoke, her voice muffled against his chest. It's so good to see you again, Luo Qing. Yet. Luo Qing's fingers gently combed through her dark purple hair. He didn't need her to explain it, he knew the memories of the future she'd mentioned weren't so simple. But if she didn't want to talk about it, he wouldn't force her. Just as he was about to let go and lead her inside, a voice called out from behind them. Lord Luo Qing, what exactly are you two doing? Both turned to see Teresa standing there, a bemused expression on her face. Chapter 199, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is Too Unreliable. 199. Night fell over Luo Qing's residence. At this moment, Luo Qing's four subordinates, along with Makoto and Rosalind, were gathered in the living room. Luo Qing sat at the head of the table with Makoto and Rosalind flanking him on either side, both in their true forms. The four subordinates sat opposite them. It had been a while since everyone had gathered together like this. That being said, if these fools hadn't returned at such an inconvenient time, the progress he'd made with Makoto earlier might have already led to something much more intense in the bedroom. So, why are you all back? Luo Qing glanced at Teresa, who sat curled up in a corner of the sofa, her expression dejected. Turning his attention back to the others, he continued. Did something happen on Dottery's end? Since arriving in Sumeru, Luo Qing had stationed his subordinates at the workshop. Officially, it was to assist with overseeing operations, but in reality, their job was to monitor the progress of the God creation plan and prevent any unforeseen incidents. Lord Luo Qing, the doctor has begun assembling the body for the God of Justice. The next step will likely involve having Lord Scaramouche conduct trial operations, Natalia reported respectfully. However, the subsequent procedures involve classified techniques. The doctor ordered us to leave, so now only academia personnel and a few of his loyal subordinates remain to guard the workshop. I see. For now, remain on standby, Luo Qing replied calmly, unsurprised by Daughtry dismissing his subordinates. Still, his thoughts churned. He had no idea how powerful the god of justice would be, nor whether his Susanoo could stand against it. To make matters worse, the pool for the seeds of nirvana hadn't rotated yet. He'd likely need to draw another batch before any progress could be made. The key now was gathering enough frustration points in Sumeru, but it wasn't easy. He had no authority in the academia, so he couldn't just mess with the scholars. As for the Fatui, with both Scaramouche and Daughtry present, they were technically allies. Starting conflict with them was unnecessary for now. The usual methods he'd employed in Liyue and Inajima wouldn't work here, leaving Luo Qing at a loss. Who could he even annoy? Wait. The eremites might be an option. After a moment of thought, Luo Qing spoke. Perfect timing. Pack up tonight, and tomorrow we're heading to the desert. The desert? What business do you have there, my lord? His subordinates looked confused. The Sumeru desert was notoriously hot. What could their master possibly want there? Just some community service, Luo Qing said with a sly smile. All right, it's getting late. You can all head back and rest. As you wish, Lord Luo Qing. As Natalia and the others stood to leave, they noticed Teresa still sulking in her corner. They tried to pull her up, but despite their efforts, she wouldn't budge. Natalia shot Luo Qing a helpless look. It's fine. You all go on ahead, Luo Qing said with a wave of his hand. Yes, my lord. Natalia glanced at Teresa one last time before leaving with Sergei. She sighed inwardly. When had Teresa become so hopelessly attached to Lord Luo Qing? They all knew their master was a scoundrel, with countless girls outside the house. Yet Teresa remained determined, chasing after him no matter how many times he turned her down. And now, after walking in on Luo Qing and Makoto hugging so intimately, it was no wonder she was upset. Once the others had left, Luo Qing looked at Teresa, who had buried her head in her knees, and then at Makoto, who was leaning on her hand, clearly amused. Rosalind sat quietly, watching like a spectator enjoying the drama. Luo Qing couldn't help but sigh. He still didn't understand why Teresa was so fixated on him. After learning about her background during his last visit to Snezhnia, he had softened toward her somewhat. Seeing her sitting there, visibly upset, Luo Qing felt a rare twinge of guilt. He glanced at Makoto, silently signaling for advice. If she claimed to be the main wife, surely she'd have an idea of what to do. Makoto simply smiled, her eyes seeming to say, do whatever you want. Luo Qing was speechless. If there was one thing he hated, it was cryptic responses. All right then. Makoto stood up and walked over to him, whispering softly. Rosalind and I will head upstairs. This is your problem to handle. With that, she exchanged a knowing look with Rosalind, and the two of them left. Watching Makoto's figure disappear upstairs, Luo Qing was momentarily stunned. So this is what it means to be a composed main wife. Shaking his head, he turned back to Teresa, unsure of how to start. To be honest, ever since learning about Teresa's past, he couldn't help but feel some degree of affection for her. How long are you planning to sit there sulking? He finally asked. Teresa lifted her head, pouting as she looked at him. Even now, you don't care about me, Lord Luo Qing. Luo Qing sighed. Nope, Teresa was still Teresa. She hadn't changed one bit. He sat down beside her, letting out another sigh. Why do you keep chasing after me? Snezhnia doesn't have just one man, you know. I only have eyes for you, my lord. Teresa sniffled, her voice tinged with grievance. All my life, I've been alone. That day, I was ready to end it all, until you saved me. I didn't ask you to, but you did. So this is my fault now. Yes, it is. Teresa said matter-of-factly. You saved me, so now I'm sticking to you. And besides, Teresa continued, her tone softening. You already have so many girls around you. Adding me wouldn't hurt, would it? What makes you think I have so many? Don't make things up. Am I wrong? Teresa replied, her tone indignant. There's that half-adepti girl from Liyue, the immortal disciple, the god from Inajima, and the shogunate noble. I know I'm just a little electro-Chechen mage. Even Natalia and the others have told me that you are destined for greatness. I can't compare to any of the amazing girls by your side. So I don't need a title. I just want to stay by your side. Wherever you go, I'll follow. Whatever you ask, I'll do. However you want me, I'll be there. Luo Qing fell silent. He had never seen someone so willing to humble themselves for him. You don't want anything? Aren't you afraid of regretting this? What's there to regret? Teresa puffed out her chest defiantly. Teresa, take responsibility for my decisions. I won't regret a thing. Seeing the determination in her eyes, Luo Qing couldn't help but question himself. Wasn't he supposed to be the scoundrel here? So why was he hesitating when she was offering herself so freely? After a brief pause, he gently placed a hand on her head. It's late. Stay here tonight. Chapter 200, This Trainee Fatui Harbinger is too unreliable. 200. Near the Teyvat tribe in the desert. After deciding to head to the desert to generate frustration points, Luo Qing wasted no time. The next morning, he and his subordinates set out toward the Teyvat tribe. Because Teresa's emotions were still unstable after her heartfelt confession the previous night, Luo Qing entrusted her to Makoto. He wasn't sure if care for her or train her was the better term, but he also lent Makoto Rosaline's simulated mask for the time being. Aside from the two of them, everyone else accompanied Luo Qing to the desert. The desert tribes often collaborated with the Fatui, so it wasn't difficult for Luo Qing to gather information about their camps. A simple inquiry with Catherine had provided details on most of the tribes and even the precise locations of their settlements. Several days later, they arrived at their destination, the Teyvat camp. As a major branch of the Eremites, the Teyvat camp housed a significant number of mercenaries. Its remote and harsh location made it an ideal target for Luo Qing's plans. Even if things got messy, it wouldn't matter much. Standing at the edge of a deep canyon, Luo Qing compared the scene to the map in his hands. Confirming the location, he turned to his subordinates and spoke in a calm voice. We're here. You all remember your assignments, right? Yes, Lord Luo Qing, Natalia and the others replied respectfully. Yes, Master, Rosalind added with a slight nod. All of them wore identical grinning masks, matching Luo Qing's signature look. The effect was both imposing and eerie. Luo Qing had briefed them on the mission beforehand, explaining their purpose. They were here to bring knowledge and education to the desert people. And if the tribes didn't cooperate, well, a little violence would get the message across. Good. These people are tough and ruthless, so don't let your guard down. If you're in danger, use a healing capsule immediately. Got it? Yes, Lord Luo Qing. Luo Qing wasn't worried about Rosalind. Her vision and cursed flames made her formidable. However, Natalia and the others, aside from the firearms he'd provided, were essentially ordinary people and vulnerable to desert trickery. He had no intention of losing his subordinates in the desert. After giving his instructions, Luo Qing stowed the map in his system inventory and led the group toward the Teyvat camp. As they approached the edge of the canyon ruins, a group of Eremite mercenaries intercepted them. Who are you? This is Teyvat territory. Outsiders are forbidden. The leader drew his curved blade, pointing it at Luo Qing's group. Relax, Luo Qing said, spreading his hands with a disarming smile. We're here on behalf of the Academia. Our mission is to improve your educational system and bring you the gift of knowledge. Knowledge? What? The leader gave Luo Qing a skeptical once-over, noting the group's mismatched appearance. While Luo Qing and his subordinates wore Academia robes, the strange masks on some of them raised questions. Ha! Do you take us for fools? We don't need your pity or charity. Get lost, or we'll bury you in the sand. The leader's voice was cold and disdainful. The Teyvat tribe had their own ways of acquiring knowledge, including smuggling books. Some of their members were more well-read than the Academia scholars tethered to their void terminals. This so-called knowledge mission was nothing but an insult to their intelligence. Don't be so quick to refuse. Come here, I'll show you something you'll definitely like. Luo Qing gestured with one hand, as if holding something in his fist, and beckoned the leader with the other. Curious but cautious, the leader exchanged glances with his companions. Assuming Luo Qing was about to offer a bribe, he hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. What do you? Ding! Frustration points +1 from News Taisha. Before he could finish his sentence, Luo Qing delivered a solid punch to his stomach. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Of course, Luo Qing had held back. These people were walking frustration point generators far more valuable alive than dead. Seeing their leader collapse, the remaining 2 guards leveled their spears at Luo Qing and prepared to attack. However, before they could take more than a few steps, ice suddenly formed beneath their feet, freezing them in place. Within seconds, the frost crept up their bodies, immobilizing them entirely, save for their heads. Now then, Luo Qing said, walking up to the frozen men with a friendly smile. You have 2 choices, take us to your matriarch, or remain here as perfect ice sculptures. Who are you people? One of the guards stammered. Didn't I already say? Luo Qing chuckled. We're from the Academia, here to offer our warmth and goodwill. Inside the Tanit camp. In the end, the proud desert warriors had no choice but to compromise, leading Luo Qing's group into their camp. Though they were wary of Luo Qing's party, especially Rosaline's vision-wielding powers, they refrained from ambushing them outright. Instead, they escorted them to the matriarch for her judgment. At that moment, the Tanit tribe's matriarch, Babel, was deep in discussion with her subordinate, Azarig. She glanced up as Luo Qing and his group were brought before her. Azarig, who are these people? As the matriarch, Babel prided herself on knowing all her tribe members. They claim to be Academia envoys, here to help us establish a better educational system, Luo Qing interjected with a calm smile. Behind him, Natalia and the others subtly spread out, 2 watching the interior and 2 guarding the exterior. Matriarch. Azarig leaned in to whisper something to Babel. With her eyes obscured by a blindfold, Luo Qing couldn't read her expression, but he caught the faint curve of her lips. The Academia. Apologies, but the Tanit tribe doesn't need the rainforest's hollow gestures of goodwill, Babel said sharply. What's more, you attacked our people and still dared to show your faces before me. Am I to understand that you are not very bright? She shot a glance to the side, and Azarig immediately drew his weapon, pointing it at Luo Qing's group. Perhaps I'll trade you to the Academia for some valuable books. With that, Azarig lunged at Luo Qing, blade aimed straight for him. Before he could land a blow, Rosalind flicked her hand, summoning a wall of ice to block the weapon. Undeterred, Azarig shifted his target and charged at Rosalind. Humph! Foolish, Rosalind muttered, waving her other hand. A burst of flames erupted around Azarig, blasting him into the sandstone walls of the ruins. Though the cryovision Luo Qing had given her wasn't as powerful as the Tsaritsas authority, it was far more versatile, allowing her to wield both ice and fire with ease. 2 elements. Babel frowned as she watched her trusted warrior fall so easily. You're not from the Academia, are you? What difference does it make? Luo Qing replied with a smirk. You don't really have a choice in the matter.
Thanks for listening.